Shia, and then you speak.
I mean, like.
Dear friends, hello, I'm told that we need to start. We have three fantastic speakers today on a very important topic that's very relevant to what's happening in northern Syria. The title of this session is The Struggle for Gender Emancipation in and the Kurdish Freedom Movement. Our first speaker will be Julie Ward, who is a British member of European Parliament for North West England region for the Labour Party. And she campaigns against violence against women, organising events such as for 1 Billion Rising. And she sits in various committees, including the most relevant one to today's discussion, which is the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. She will unfortunately need to leave almost exactly after she finished her speech. I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me here today. I know you had a conference all day yesterday as well, and why you are here is really, really supremely important. And although I have to go, I know that many of you here. I'm seeing Jonatan sitting in the front row. We were together on the Imrali delegation last February, and I'm still very active in fighting for Mr. Öcalan's freedom and to try and ascertain his health and well-being. I'm seeing Thomas, Miley, hi. We were also on the same delegation, and I've had the wonderful privilege of meeting Carrie-Anne this morning, and I feel like I know her because we're communicating all the time about these issues. And then my great friend Estella Schmidt from Peace in Kurdistan, which is a British organisation. And all of the organisations here, I think without you, we couldn't do what we do as politicians. We rely on the information you send us. I mean, you know, you're sending us many emails, you're provoking us, you're alerting us to dangers, you're trying to give us, if you like, the meat, the substance with which we make the political interventions that we make. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. I'm going to talk about my engagement with, if you like, with gender emancipation and with the feminist issue, because the feminist movement and the Kurdish movement are clearly linked. And it goes without saying that they both aim at liberating an oppressed group from the domination of another group. And I think the relationship between these two movements is very complex. They're profound links. The Kurdish movement, as we know it today, could not exist without deep roots in feminist ideology. Abdullah Öcalan himself has explained that a society cannot find the path to freedom without the emancipation of women. Moreover, Kurdish women's experiences have some specifics due to the multiple form of oppression and discrimination they face as women and as members of a stateless nation. Everybody has heard about the Kurdish women who fight against ISIS, Daesh, because it has been picked up by the mainstream media outlets. However, I want to go into the topic a bit more in depth, because most of the time these women's ideology is not given a real voice, and I think that's what's important. Within the Kurdish movement there are multiple forms of feminism, and I've become familiar with a few of them. So I first visited the feminist magazine Jinha. I visited their headquarters in Diyarbakir in October last year, and it was 2 weeks before they were shut down. We didn't know they were going to be shut down. Maybe they did. Maybe they already knew it was going to happen. They were just waiting for when. I returned 3 weeks later, in fact, with Melanie Gingel from Peace in Kurdistan, where we participated in a women's conference. We saw how strong the women were, that they refused to be silenced, that they will always find the means to communicate. Maybe the building was shut down, but they still have an online space, a social space, where they are communicating. It was very moving to be there, because I remember the conference on the Sunday, and actually I wrote about this. You know, those of us who were on the Imrali delegation, we have made contributions to a publication which is coming out, and I write about this day that we spent together with these women. And many of the women there, some of them were they were elected. They were either elected in local politics, or they were HDP MPs. These women were dancing in the full knowledge that they were probably going to be arrested at some point and detained and imprisoned and tried and imprisoned. And it was very empowering for me and the other European members. We had people there from Germany, from the UK, from Ireland. We had different women from different political left groups, but also from different countries there, to be with these women in solidarity. So we had the conference, and they're speaking about the oppression, but they're more than that. They're celebrating. They're celebrating being women, and it was extraordinary, because as we were dancing in this hotel, in this conference, the military and the police, they were just like surrounding the hotel. And what were we doing? We were dancing. You know, we were being women and we were dancing. And here is the state terrified of women dancing. Truly, what was happening. subsequent, so, you know, I am more empowered as a feminist because I am with these women doing this. It makes me stronger. And I think, you know, we are living in the age of Trump, okay? We are living in the age of Brexit, when so many of the things which we stand for are now being attacked, and civil society space is being closed down. And the people, these women that I met, they're not afraid, okay, to take the space, and they're not afraid to dance. They're not afraid to celebrate their identity. And I think that that is really, it's a lesson for all of us. Since then, now, as a part of a project launched by the Committee to Protect Journalists and Human Rights Watch, two organisations that have launched the project, I'm now twinned to one of the editors of the magazine, so Zara Doam. She's a feminist artist and journalist, and she's currently in jail. Why is she in jail? She's in jail for making a picture. Okay, so she is using her creativity, her artistic exploration, her sensibilities to make images of the places which are being bombarded, destroyed, desecrated by the Turkish state. And you know, I think in prison she's even started up some kind of project with some of the other prisoners there. So she's still continuing. And I wanted to twin with her specifically, partly because I'd been to the headquarters of Jinha and I'd seen it both open, full of women having meetings and talking about their values and their struggle. But I also went there and saw it closed, shut with steel doors. But I wanted also to link with her because I was an artist before I was a politician. I worked in theatre. I'm a poet. And that is very important, that I'm not just here as a politician. I'm here as a woman. I'm here as an artist. I'm here as an activist, as a campaigner. You know, we have to be all these things in all the different spaces that where we are given a place to speak and talk. So my commitment to feminism, to the cause of Kurdish freedom, it's with you. I'm really sorry I have to go. I think it's fantastic that you come here. I think this is, I don't know, how many years now, Karian? 14. You know, let's hope that we're doing it when we're celebrating Mr. Öcalan's freedom. Let's hope that we're still doing it, okay, when those women are dancing without thinking they're going to be imprisoned for dancing. Okay, right, okay. And I am going, next week I'm in Strasbourg, so next week I will go, because every time I'm in Strasbourg now I'm also going to be with the Kurdish people there. They have a tent sit-in. Also I went to speak to the Secretariat of the CPT there to try and get them to be more open with us about the situation for Mr. Öcalan. So I'm doing what I can. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We'll continue with Ms. Rahila Gupta, and then we'll have a Skype connection to northern Syria. Rahila Gupta is a freelance journalist and writer and long-standing member of Southall Black Sisters, and she was nominated for numerous awards, and she's been collaborating with Beatrix Campbell on a book, Why Doesn't Patriarchy Die?, which will investigate how patriarchy fits with diverse political systems. She has been commissioned by Idle Women Arts Project to write the Rubaiyat of Rojava. I hope you'll mention that as well. And her articles are published in The Guardian, New Humanist, New Internationalist, and Open Democracy, and other print and online publications.
Thanks, Guney. Okay, well, I'm deeply honored to be invited to speak about one of the most, I think, exciting political developments in my lifetime. Although I can claim no direct role in the Kurdish women's struggle, I'm so grateful that I've lived long enough to witness the achievement of political goals around which much of my own life's work has centered, and in the Middle East, of all the unexpected places, So I thank the organizers, especially Estella Schmidt, for giving me this opportunity. I just want to start by saying that, I've been talking about the feminist revolution in Rojava since I visited it in Britain, where there is very little knowledge about it. And I have got used to starting a speech in a conference like this by getting people to put their hands up to say how many of you have heard of Rojava. Now, I know that that is totally inappropriate in this situation because almost every one of you not only knows about Rojava, but probably knows a lot. And so I found it quite hard to know how to pitch this piece because I'm usually used to giving some factual information. So I will do all of that, so bear with me if it's stuff that you already know. Okay, so they say that history is written by the victors, but not, it seems, when it comes to the Kurdish people. From a base of 3 cantons in 2012, along a narrow strip of land in northern Syria, the Kurdish-led multi-ethnic Syrian Democratic Forces have liberated nearly 1/3 of Syria from Daesh or ISIS, which is the most barbaric group in our contemporary times. But it's not the military victory per se that I want to celebrate here, but the rolling out of a secular, radical democracy with women in the driving seat, which of course has been made possible by the military victory. It's an important ideological victory against the deeply patriarchal, deeply sectarian, and deeply violent interpretation of religion that ISIS and other Islamist groups adhere to. So here is a society embodying dreams, ideas, and aspirations of progressive people all over the world, a society that could be a template not just for Syria, but for the whole world, and yet so few people have heard about it, as I was saying. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I really feel that there is a conspiracy of silence, and I see it as my job to try and puncture this conspiracy, this silence. And not just to provide solidarity to Kurdish women, but to be inspired ourselves in the political work that we do in our countries, just by the knowledge that under the most difficult of circumstances, in the middle of a war zone, starting from scratch, in conservative societies, a dream of gender equality is being realized. So this is where I'm going to tell you a few things that you probably already know, but how did Rojava start? It was actually a question that was troubling me right at the beginning when I first heard about it. And I was surprised to see that actually it was as a result of the Arab Spring, because again, the narrative in the West is that the Arab Spring has failed in all the countries that we've seen it, apart, some people will say, in Tunisia there's been some moderate gains. But I think Rojava is an example of the success of the Arab Spring. So democratic federalism is a form of direct democracy in which there is the stateless bottom-up structure where you have neighborhoods forming communes and they elect their representatives to the next level on the co-presidentship rule of one man and a woman sharing power. And this is facilitated by a multi-party organization, TEVDEM, which is the Movement for Democratic Society. And the same principle applies all the way up to city and national levels, including the running of cooperatives, schools, the army, the police force, in fact, any institution you care to name. And at every level, from the commune to the city level, there are committees to deal with health, education, economics, utilities, and conflict resolution or peace, which includes domestic violence and self-defense. On each of these mixed-sex committees, 40% is reserved for either sex, with 20% up for grabs, depending on who puts themselves forward. And as if that wasn't amazing enough, you have Congria Star, the women's umbrella organization, which runs a women-only autonomous structure, parallel to TEVDEM, to ensure that a feminist perspective is brought to bear on all issues. In fact, they have the power of veto. So this structure very clearly emphasizes the fact that a level playing field can only be created by tilting power in the direction of women. And in matters of violence against women, for example, only the Congress-Star conflict resolution committees will get involved. If they're unable to resolve the matter, then the case is referred to the women-only asayish or police officers. If the courts rule that the perpetrator must be imprisoned, he is taken away, given gender equality training, which I find absolutely wonderful, and returned to the home only if the woman wants him back and he appears to have reformed himself. The situation then is monitored by the Conflict Resolution Committee. The other thing that I found absolutely amazing was that there's been an extensive legislative assault on patriarchal practices. The Women's Ministry was only set up in January 2014, and yet the list of laws that they have passed is really impressive. So child marriage, forced marriage, dowry, and polygamy have been banned. And they go further, in fact. They've introduced a clause that I think countries like India could well consider, which is that any attempt to stop a woman marrying of her own free will is a criminal act. Again, honor killings, violence, and discrimination have been, against women have been criminalized. Then women, regardless of their marital status, have been given the right to custody of their children. A woman's testimony is equal to a man's. A woman has a right to equal inheritance, and marriage contracts are issued in civil courts. And Sharia courts have been disbanded. Now, I think that there is a particular irony that in a place like Britain, we have Sharia courts, and we have been fighting for the dismantlement of these Muslim tribunals that are active in Britain. And Sharia, in fact, the Sharia courts are to be found all over Syria, not just under Assad, but also under the rebel-held territory. So, and I find that the clear-headed rejection of religion in the public square is really refreshing, because many on the progressive left in the West no longer seem to understand its deleterious effects on women's rights. Do you want me to stop?
If you can.
Okay. So I will just try and sum up the rest of my speech, then maybe in conversation we can talk a little bit more about it. The thing that I wanted to say, I think the difference between Kurdish feminism and Western women's feminism, and I can't actually summarize the different branches of Western feminism because there are many, but I think the critical difference, I think, is that Öcalan's principle is that feminism can never be totally successful in a capitalist system, that race and class equality in a secular democratic system is part of the struggle for women's liberation. And I think that's absolutely right. I think some of the tensions that we see amongst feminists in Britain is because there is no race and class equality and because we live under a capitalist system. I was also very impressed with the ethnic inclusivity in Rojava. I think what I will do, it's hard for me to summarize all of this. I just want to end with one of the things that I found very surprising on my return from Rojava. I thought that people in Britain, the progressive left, who have not heard of Rojava, will be, as of one voice, be delighted, excited that this thing is happening in our current times. You know, it is really a moment of great hope. And I was surprised to find, the degree of misinformation that there is, the degree of hostility in some parts of the left to the Rojava revolution, and also amongst feminists, where there is a strong pacifist tradition, and they feel that women's rights cannot be delivered, you know, at the barrel of a gun, that violence is essentially masculinized, and therefore women have to reject it. And the Kurdish women's response to that is that this is a privilege. Non-violence is a privilege that they cannot afford, which I totally understand and support. And again, the hostility from other women in the rest of their Syrian sisters, with whom I've had many heated debates in London, who seem to be suspicious of the Kurdish women's struggle because they think that the Kurdish project is about declaring independence and dismembering Syria. So these are all the struggles that we have to fight, not just in terms of where the world is, how the world is involved in Syria, but also just in terms of our own progressive circles and how to get them on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahila. And now we are going to have a guest from northern Syria, Foza Yusuf, who is a Kurdish Syrian politician from the town El Dirbesiye in Al Jazeera province of northern Syria. And she's currently the co-president and constituent council of the Democratic Federation of Northern Syria. Brez Yusuf, dengimente.
Rast.
Hun behar khatın, dikarın haftına ve desbebikin.
Rast.
Denge ve başte, dikarın desbebikin.
Bele. Biseri de az tavayı delega.
I was there in northern Syria in September, and this is kind of inevitable. Yeah. It is one of the important problems in Rojava, in my experience, that they only have to rely on Turkish mobile networks near the border of Turkey, and apart from that, there's only the military forces have some sort of internet connection. Huh? Possibly, and this connection is probably through Turkish mobile networks. I'm obviously not qualified to talk about the gender struggles in Kurdistan and in northern Syria. But I've been in northern Syria, as I said, in September, and I had the opportunity to talk to some very inspiring people. And also yesterday I had contacts with the YPJ soldiers, some YPJ soldiers. Women soldiers, and I remember when this topic came before me, gender emancipation and Kurdish politics. I remember one scene very vividly during the fight in Kobani, when there was a video which is still on YouTube. You can see an ISIS tank is advancing towards Kurdish positions, and who apparently only have Kalashnikovs in their hand, which is like it's a very desperate situation where you would be surprised. And this is a time when ISIS was seen as invincible throughout the region. And I remember hearing a ululating sound. Most of you would know that how Kurdish women do that. And after that, how the YPG soldiers picked up and kind of that increased their morale. And I was speaking to Kimi Taylor yesterday, asking the role of the female fighters in Syria. She was telling me some interesting things, including when a female fighter is martyred, or it is much more heavy on their male comrades than if a close friend of them die. So, and she believes that this is because women represent hope to those soldiers, to those fighters. And when women fall in a battle, they feel that piece of hope is taken away from them. And she believes fighting played a really important role for the women there. That women, by fighting, proved that they can do anything to their male comrades in the society. And she also mentioned something, and this is something I've observed as well. I spent a few hours with a group of YPG soldiers, Arab YPG soldiers, on the front line in Raqqa, and I realized the whole, Arab group of YPG soldiers. Some of them were wearing Öcalan badges on their arms, and I asked each of them. Each and every one of them, why they joined and what do they think about Öcalan. And one of them, interestingly, around age 40 something, told me that his sister was forcibly married to a rich man when he was young, and he never forgot he'd come over it. And when he heard about the pro-women gender emancipation ideas of Öcalan, that was the thing that made him to be persuaded and to join the YPG. So it was interesting to hear an Arab man took his place in YPG because of the YPG's or the Kurdish movement's female ideas. One thing that interests me, though, in the West, you have women, empowerment of women sometimes threatens men in Western societies. This didn't look like it happened in northern Syria. And many men were very happy to see women playing a significant role. How, if you could elaborate on that?
Well, I think that formed the center of a lot of my interviews with women there, because they talked in terms of the huge progress made, but then they also talked about how deeply entrenched patriarchy is. So the struggle is an uphill struggle. I think what is fascinating is that the educational aspect, the ideological education that takes place, where people are actually sent off, well, not sent off, I mean, it is a voluntarily chosen thing, but every year there is a fair degree of, you participate in, I think, 6 weeks or something like that in classes, and you're given ideological training. So a lot of that kind of gender awareness has, I think, come as a result of this ideological training. Because when I went to meet the women of Sara, which is a group of women which deals with honor killings and domestic violence, they were very happy at one level. I was interested in the fact that they were so open about this, because they were saying that it's really hard to mobilize Arab women because there is a lot of conservatism. The patriarchy is much more entrenched. There are huge issues of polygamy, that Kurdish women have a tradition of having been more emancipated. So there are these differences, and these differences are openly acknowledged in a way that, for example, we would not do at Southall Black Sisters. We would be very careful in Britain to talk about the preponderance of a certain kind of domestic violence within, say, the Muslim community or the Hindu community, because we would be afraid of feeding into a kind of racist narrative that one community was worse than the other. So I tried to figure out why it was that Kurdish women in Rojava were quite happy to talk about these differences between themselves and Arab women. And I came to the conclusion that it's partly the racial inclusivity of the administration, because you've got 10%, the Kurds have given up their majority status in northern Syria. So in parliament or majlis, they have 10% quotas for 10% for Muslims, 10% for Arabs, 10% for Christians. Sorry, I shouldn't say Muslims, for Kurds. 10% for Arabs and 10% for Christians, which is voluntarily giving up their majority status. Given the history of discrimination, I think that is really an open-minded way of looking at things. So if you have that degree of inclusivity, then you can also probably be more open about being critical that, in fact, Arab societies are more conservative where women are concerned. So I think you were talking to soldiers who had been through that training, because what's interesting is that of the, very short training that these soldiers get, half of it is on use of weapons, but half of it is on, patriarchy and democratic confederalism and ideological training. So I think you'd seen somebody who'd been through that mill. And that, I'm not trying to be cynical about it, it's great that there has been this shift, but I think it's new.
And we've seen in the media that the SDF forces dedicated the victory in Raqqa to women, and then women in turn dedicated it to Öcalan, Abdullah Öcalan. This wasn't necessarily how it was perceived from outside. In Europe, for example, the victory in Raqqa wasn't perceived as something a victory for women. Why do you think there's this difference of perception there on the ground in Syria and here?
Foza, Yusuf is back. Okay,
yes.
can talk.
Brez Yusuf. Denkeye, dengemente. Brez Yusuf, dengemente.
Rast.
Başa vaktemen gerek tüneye dıkarın despe bakın.
Tamamdır.
Dıkarın despe bakın.
Diseri tevayi delegasyonu hazır az bilgilerimi silav dikim. Bitevayi binavi tevayi jinin azadi khaz jinin tekoşer yego Rojava li Bakuriye Suriye jan dikim. O binavi tevayi şervan jin yego hember Daesh tekoşineki dijwar dedin hatta Rojava hero le derazore dinav şereki dijwar dedin hemberi zordariya Daesh ko sistema bavuksalari belki de asla heri bilindi, zirva heri mezinde Daesh temsildeki. O iro jin le Rojava, le Bakuriye Suriye, jinen Kurd, jinen Arab, Suriyan, و her vaha desti qadanı ev, ve lehemberi ev zordariya Daesh, و heri zede poletiya jina, و hatta kriyunu krotuna jina, de herem Ahmed per bawayek hovane peşxis ilo tekoşine dijwar te peşxistan jbojye binavet tabayi hamu jin van jinan jinen tekoşe az wa hamiya slav dikim disa hamu kesin ku ve jvina çekirne u fırsat ekmi sabekim jamwan dest xoşpiyawan dikim na brasi yani profşa Persgireka jin di cihane de melekari bije qati'an ki tem şandın serduna her çqasa navlena haktirin lebele bigişti ravşeki pir xarab heye aloziya ya sistema banksalari brengi heri xarab leserjine bangotiki o iro paradigmen bu hem gelan hem jinan hem hamu hezem bindest خستی بن باندورا خو اباجی مرکاری بج آلوزی کی مزن دتبای جهان ده خستی هولی و هری زیادتر جن و زاروک جویا باندور دبن پارادیگمaya نجات پرستی ol peresti mezhep peresti zayen peresti o zanist peresti ev her çar paradigma per bandoreki xarab li ser jiyana mirovatiyê kirine û tiştekî pir acil ku îro xwe li ser me ferz dike ku em hemberî vay paradigmayekî nûh pêş bixînin û divê derbarê de rêber Abdullah Öcalan براستی پر گاوین به جرأت و پر گاوین به جسارت دوی دربارت پیش خستن لهمبری نجات پرستی نتا پارادیگمaya نتوا دموکراتیک و لهمبری زاین پرستی جی پارادیگمaya آزادی جن و جینولوژی پیش خست مرو کاری جی دست سالیا بیستاند yani ev netav devlet و نجات پرستی و همان دمید زاین پرستی پر داوند کردن. رهبر وجلان هم بری ویا پر گاوه کی گرین پیش خست و اف گاوا نتوا دموکراتیک و جینولوژی. ام جی وکی جنن روجاوای کردستانه و هر وها جنن باکوری سوری پشتی تکوشینا به 20 سالان و باندورا و پارادیگمaya رهبر وجلان مرکاری بجد آلوزیا سوری ده هزا هری حاضر و هزا هری رخصتین کری ل دناب جنن یه روجاوای کردستان ده بوش بوجی شورش جن و شورش نتوی و هر وها شورش دموکراسی یا گل ترکیه یا گل سوریا پیشکت مرکاری بجه همو بهبره مشیان فرقه کی گله کی مزن ده روجاوای کردستان ده ابو کو پرزگرک یه نتوی تنه نهاتن دزگرتن لکلکا شورشا نتوی لکلکا چارەسەرکردنê pirsgirêkên netewî pirsgirêkên demokrasî her wiha pirsgirêka azadiya jin jî wekî pirsgirêkekî esasî hat destgirtin û xebat hatin pêşxistin tevlîbûna jinan bi awayekî aktif ji bo tevayê aliyên jiyanê aliyê siyasî aliyê leşkerî aliyê aborî çandî her wiha civakî merekarî bêje bandorekî gelekî mezin kir ji bo sistema bavîtsalarî lawaz bibe û bi vî rengî jin ew baweriya got wenda kirbû di van hezar salên ye derbasbûyî de bi rastî merekarî bêje divê demê de carek din qezenç kir bi xwe bawerî qezenç kir û veya hişt got civak bî hemberî ev hêza jin pir bandor bibe. Ez karim bêjim ku di van 6 salê derbasbûyî de ku xwedîspêre têkoçîna 40 salî ya tevgera azadiya Kurdistanê bi rastî di Rojavayê Kurdistanê û di tevayê Sûrî de Rûnesansekî jin hat jiyankirin gelek zorî û zehmetî hat medîtin lêberê gelek gavên mezin jî hatin avêtin. Ez karim vana pir bi kinayê bi vî rengî bêjim ew heman demê de mêvanê we yê wir jî behsa vî tiştî kirin ji bo jî ez vana pir dubare nakim bi taybet qanûnên jiniyê bo derketin veya bandorekî mezin li ser civakê kir dîsa sistema hevserokatî pir bandorekî mezin kir ji bo jiyana ya siyasî demokratîzekirina siyasetê de rolekî pir mezin lîst sistema hevserokatî ya gol Rojavayê Kurdistan dimeşî û niha jî li Bakurê Sûrî belav dibe. Her wiha me re karî bêjim îro di sistema me ya got em niha pêş dixînin sistema Federasyona Demokratîk ya Bakurê Sûrî me di peymannama civakî de gelek mijdarên esasî û bingehîn di derbarê jin de bicî kiriye di peymannama civakî de ev mijaran ya esasî jin ji sedî pêncî di sistema me de cî bigire û ez dixwazim bi wesîla vê civînê mizgîniyê bidim tevayê jinan ku îro di sistema me ji komîna bigire دیسا مجلسین بلدا مجلسین احیا و مجلسین کانتونه جسدی پنجی جن دوی سیستم جی گرت و ده بجاتنا جد بسرکت هر وها دیسا پیماننامه مده اوه کی وسا یعنی درباست به ماده کی وسا درباست به کو سیستم ما جکومینا حتی کنگرا گلان و لسر سیستم هفسروکاتی خود درونشکاندن دتوایی کمیتان دتوایی مکانیزمانی ریبریه ده و وکوی جن اساس بگردن و جن عمر به همان يعني رجاء ويجي بقرن اف مجالنيه اساسيه كو مركاري بيج تد جي دغره ديسا جن ما في وهي كو بارتي ابا بك ما في وهي كو رخصني خوي خسر چي بك ما في وهي كو مجلس خو ابا بك وما في وهي كو دي سيستما فدراسيون ديمقراطيك دي سيستما خوي خسر چي بك اولا دواره عدالت ده دواره آبوری ده دواره سیاسی ده دواره چاندی ده یعنی ما فیجنه هایی که همو آلان هجیانه ده باوه که خسر و باوه که سربخوا کار پاره خستم بگه گاوین ویاتین آبتن جنها به گاوین آبتن ام دخوازن سیستم خویا فدراسیون دموکراتیک لسر هیما آزادی جن آبا بگن و مرا امکارم بجن که مبدأ اساسی پیماننامه مجواکی ده یا فدراسیون دموکراتیک یا باکوری سوری که آزادی جن مبدأ کی بنگهینه سیستم ما خالتر آبادی که و اف بنگها آزادی جواکی و بنگها عدالت اینه من بفیرنگی ده پیماننامه خیا جواکی که پیناسیه اف هالبجاتنا نية داوية استخازم بكناي هنا كي بحثوان بكم ما دوان سمه داوية دو هالبجاتن بيشخصن هالبجاتن كومينان كو يعني مجلس يعني غوندا ومجلس تاخا هر وها بري ويا ب شش روجاجي يكي مهي ما هالبجاتنا نية مجلسان لدار خصم براستی رجاء تبلیغونا جنا هم دالی نامزدبینه ده هم جدالی دنگدایینه ده پر هجماره کی گریل بو و افجی پر یا هزه کی مزن دامه کو جن لبس سیستم خودی داد کردن سیستم فدراسیون سیستم خود بینن و مرکاری بیجه ببیرنگی ببان هم بجارتنا جی درکت هولی کو سیستم فدراسیون دموکراتیک یا باکوری سوری نه تنه سیستما گارانتی کرنا مافین گلانن مافی باوی هر وها سیستما جنیجی سیستما فدراسیون یا باکوری سوری و ببیننگی ام نه تنه باجاری خو نه تنه جواکا خو ام باندور دکن نها لرقاجی نقاشک پیشکتیج بو قانون جن چوا پیش بکیبل من بود نقاشکی وسط پیشکتیم و اسکارم بیشم اذ گوهرتن و گوهرتن یکود هرم آمده چی بون لسر جواک عرب پر باندور کی مزن کرد مره ویا روش بروش دبینه لسر جنن عرب پر باندور کی مزن کرد اذ هالبجارتن یکومینا ده حمو گندن یه فکات عرب دجی هفسروکاتی جن چی بو لرقا ایرو هفسروکاتی سیستم هفسروکاتی پیشکتی لمجلس درازور ده پیشکت لمن بیچ پیشکت یعنی ev pela ya şorek sajın ya bu jibakure Suriye Rojavaya Kurdistan dest fikir usa ev pel roj broj le deverendine ji Suriye belav dibe u ev ya hezeki mezin de tevayı tevgara jin Suriye yani dibe de medaviyet gelek meclisen jina ye Suriye le deverendin ji avabun disa merekari beje de tevayı herema rojla tanavin دیسا باندوره کی مزین کر اف قانون جین یگو خسریه دموکراتیک درخص لسر باشور کردستان لسر نقاشن حتی حرکتن آزادی ترکیه و هر وقت باندوره کی مزین کر مرکاری بج براستی رو شورشکی جنا پیش بکره دبیستو پنج مجداره ده جن لتوایی باکور سوری لتوایی روجاوای کردستان مشین گله کی مزن پیش خستن مر لکوبانه جبو شدتا تكوشنا الهمبري شدتا جوجنة جنتك الهمبري و ميران لكوباني مشيكي مزن پیش خصن يعني نتنجن آزاد بن روج بروج بهاتون وقبرتن تزنيتا مردجي چه دبن هر وها امكارن بيجن إيرها إيدي حوالي ما يمير يبو بدمقراطية باورياوان هي بآزادية جن باورياوان هي ام دبینن لجادا لتوایی دوران ایدی او بخواب خوشی دناب لگره دنه جبر کو براستی اف سیستم باوی سالاری نتنه جنا کولدی که میرانجی کولدی که سیستم شدت نتنه هم بر جنات مشاندن هر وها لسر توایی کسیم بندست مشاندن بوی وکی پارادیگما کی او هک همو جهان خستی بن باندورا خود جبوجي آزادی آجن و آزادی همه پیوستی پهره چبیه که هم جواک خواه کی طایره کی پناسد کن اگر جن و میر وکی بازی کی طایرینه جبوگو اف طایر جبوگو باوایی که آزاد بفره پیوسته هر دو باستویجی آزاد بن ام ببه پنسیب حرکت کن جبوجي أكاديمية مهنة أكاديمية جن أم ميرجي تدي پرورده دكين جناجي تدي پرورده دكين جبوكو أم أف قانون قدر كتنا جبوكو أف بهرتون بغرتنا چه بوي نتنه ده قانونات بمينه أبا ببه چاندكي جواكي و ببه وكي شوبداريه كي جواكي جبر برابطي جهن أف سيستم گلت بانكوري وهنه و ام باورم کو اف باندورانا وسا بسال دو سال در باس نابش گوش تکوشینه کی به هم پا پیوسته تکوشینه کی فکری پیوسته تکوشینه کی زانستی پیوسته و هر وها تکوشینه کی بردوام پیوسته ام ها هاو دادم کو مفردات یعنی پروگرام یه پروردهی جی ام باوه لسر ذهنیت تکی آزادی خواست ام پیش و ببینم که ام دخوازن اف سیستما یا آزادی آجن ایدی بکن سیستمی که جواکی و همو آلی جیانه تخناف باندورا خود
زور سپاس 5 دقیقه ما از و bahse باندوره سیستما لسر جنن عرب جکر از پسکرکی که کرتاسی من هیا هون سر تبلیبونا جنن عرب هزن لشکری و هزن سیویل اون نسبت وان چه قاسه اون چه دکارن ببیجن
نه لگلک جیان فرق هیچ بر بهونه جیهان دمکی درج رزگار بونیم اینا حسه که مثلا شدادی هول تل ابيض يعني جريسبي ابانا دمکی درج بوی بانا هاتن رزگار کنش بوجی رجای جنا پر بلند مثلا دکو میناده اوانجی وان جانا همو سدی پنجیش خو د همو مجلس ادو و دکو میناده جیگرتن ابجی استا هم گوهرتون و گوهرتون یا بود جواک عرب دیجی چه بوید دیگر کرد لبله میناک رقا و دیرزور و مم طبقه و مم بجده هین وان جانا وصا هندك يعني هرتن تشدبن ومركار بج يعني دوان تلاهين شوية البجاتين تشينبونه يعني سيستم هفسه قاتل والبيشتي اللي بله ده وصا جباب بينا ويده هم بيجومان دستيكش بيجوان آلانان هاتن رزقاكن اللي بله آلان هو دمك بويه مركار بج رجاء جنا يعني جسدي شست هفته ایدی دکبن ناو تبگیره و دناو مکانیزمه فدراسیون ده آلان عرب و آلان کرد و کرن یعنی رجای جن سدی پنجی نهاجی گفتی.
باشه او پرسکری که گدن باوریا و سقاطه و هیا سر koalisyona Amerika'yı hund dikkarın berdevam bakın yani koalisyon berdevam dikka baveriye u sikate ve heye.
نعم ما تكوشينا خو بري كواليسيون دست فكر بول شورش ما بري كواليسيون بو كواليسيون تيك باكوري سوري د ما دست فكر بو جوج يعني ام بهذا خباورن بباراديغما خباورن و بتكوشينا غومه پیش خصيان بي باورن بگومان اتفاق نیه نابنتوی اتفاق سیاسی گرین گنجو پیشوچونه لبله اگر ام هزا پای خسر ام هزا پای هندرین باوی که باش رخصتن نکن و ام ترا خونکن اگر کواليسيون بمينجي پیشرو جامنینن جبو جی هزا نه اساسی هزا گلانه هزا جواتامه هزا جنانه و ام قنصر هزا خویا دینامیکا خویا هندرین ام قدسپیرن و ام دوی باوریه دنه و اگر ما خباش رخصتن که و ما تکوشینه که بهز دا چاکو خوبانم هرکس مجبور بود دنگ خواب بکنیک به هزا خوی هندرین امکارن دوستی خوشی چه و امکارن اتفاق باشی پیش بخین.
Gelek spas Brez Yusuf. We don't have time, I think, for another question. If a member of the audience will have a quick question, I can try to put it to her. But yeah, we need to be very quick. If you have any question to Ms. Yusuf, I'll do my best to try to translate it for her. One last question, and then yes, please.
A very brief question, but many people are wondering why the name Rojava was cancelled from the Democratic Federation of Northern Syria. Maybe you can explain why this name was changed and what does it mean?
Havale kelever de perseku yani çima peyvi Rojava nha navlı federasyon tüneye.
Ben tam ki nav despeki navi Rojava tire bakuri Suri bu vakti gudu halan sistema federasyonu pişti ve meni kaşkırın brasti telekni kaşı bunko yani ev tamamıyla federasyonu ne tane jibo gele Kurd ne tane jibo netavaki her vaha em jibo tevayı Suri veya vaki reka çareseriye bugün o peviste ve deme naveki bişti bu herkes fatır bibine jiber destek mec mantıkı Kurdar destekir proje evvel pişti ve gelek alani araba hatın rızgar kırın دوی رنگی پیوست بکو نافجی وکی ناوروکا خواه هر کسی بگره نافخواه و هر کسی خطاب بکه جبوه موسا راستر دید که باکور سوری دش برد باکور سوری ده هم کرد هم عرب هم سوریان هم من هم هر وکی دن جبر که اگر تو ناوی روجاوای کردستان تقوی دمه که تو ناوی همو هرما تخیه و بیاوی گلک زحمت بباید جبوه مدید نزدیکاتیا هری راست او کو نابک همو گل همو پیکاته خاطر ببینن و اوجی به لهفاتنا هر کسی باکور سوری هات تجراندن لبل ناو روجاوای کردستان دهندره پیماننامه هی و دیسا ام بیژن مافی گل کرد همو دهندره پیماننامه جواکی دیجی هاتی گارانتی کرن نفس بونا و ناوروک هفدو بگرن yani خطاب تبعي كلام بكي.
برسكريك يدين هي؟
بله.
بله روشي تركيا شاوة يعني تركيا نها تخوزي إيش عفرينة بك الودرة تبليفي شيء بأساطرة هفديتنا شيء روشي وان شاوة حاضرية وجبوه هنا.
نا تركيا بيجومان لسوريا يعني دواري استراتيجية براسي واندار كرج بركو تركيا دستك حتى نهار جبوگو سوری تا تخناب آلوزیه دو شهر سوری دور بکه پر هولدا دستپکی دست جبهت النصرة پشت دا جيش ارتش آزاد و دستکی که پر مزن دا داعش اونها جیل ادلبه وانو جبهت النصرة كوكي بردوام القاعدة الهف كرن اونها ادلب خست بن اواخو تنگریا خو و بری خدای عفرینه Türkiye nafazı istikrarlı Suriye çevre, Türkiye nafazı çareseli Suriye çevre. Jiberko nafazı ev çareseliya bandor evleser prizgrekin Türkiye jibgin. استرم ويا بيجم أم يعني وكي قال ما يعرفين أبو صالح تركي تهديد كجوه إيش بك قال له درد نظام مدكارية كي مزندية يعني جبوكو خبب هارزجي حاضرتي هات نكرن وأم بعد بجن يعني أجر شر العفينة بيش بكبه وتاني بعفينة وسينوردار نمينه أو تبايع سينور تركي تخ مترسيد وتخ وشر الهردري بيش بكبه جبركو بومبل عفرينة بتقن قامشوا بداي نامينه طلابيات بداي نامينه حسكي بداي نامينه الشام كرد يقول الشامي جيان بكن والحلب جيان بكن بداي نامينه أفتى واتاك وأب ألوزي والسوري تبايع بلا ببه وأم دخازن بريتا كونفرانس توجي هشيارية كيف كنكو اگر براستی جواتان نبنتوی دخازی چاره سری لسوری پیشی که به و کریزا سوری به ریکن سیاسی به چاره سر کرن و دمه پیوست او هلوسته که الهمبری ترکی بسیلن جبرکو شر العفینه چه به و همو جبینن کو جبو چاره سری سوری پیش که به تکرن همو هولدان و تکرن عفرین شر به لسوری آشتی پیش نکبه ببه نزیکاتی herkes شروبه بکی و هرگز بده نشاندن و نزیکاتی که راسله امجد بیجن کوه عفرین وکی کوبانه چوا برخوادانیه که مزن لیهات پیش خستن عفرین جی و برخوادانیه 100 ساله پیش بکبه و ام نهلون کو عفرین بتا اواهی جهل داگتریا ترک بلمتین کرن
Gelek spas Brez Yusuf. Život evli buna ve. As Varzanım, I think we don't have any time, any more time. Yeah. Thanks very much for listening to us, and sorry about the problems with the connection on Skype.
Sorry.
Thank you. I would like to invite the next panelists, Mr. Jonatan Steele, Evaggelos Aretaios, Mr. Yusuf Mohammad Sadiq, Thomas Jeffrey Miley, Darnell Stephen Summers, and Michael Gunter. I don't have it here. Sorry, we have also Jonathan Spire. Are they all? Is it all one group? I think so. Okay. And Takis Hadjigeorglou. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I got him run to the toilet.
Okay, me too. Λοιπόν, καλημέρα σε όλους. Παρακαλώ βάρτε τα ακουστικά σας. Good morning, everybody. Can you please have your earphones to understand me in Greek and in translating in English or in your language? Εγώ είμαι ο Τάκης Χατζηγεωργίου, είμαι ευρωβουλευτής του ΑΚΕΛ από την Κύπρο, μέλος της ομάδας της αριστεράς στο Ευρωπαϊκό Κοινοβούλιο. Η ομάδα της αριστεράς, όπως είναι γνωστό, συνδιοργανώνει αυτό το συνέδριο κατέτος με θέμα το μεγάλο κουρδικό ζήτημα που απασχολεί όλη την περιοχή αλλά και την Ευρώπη. Σήμερα μαζί με τον συνάδελφο τον Jonatan που είναι στα δεξιά μου θα συντονίσω με αυτή τη συζήτηση. Έχουμε αρκετούς ομιλητές στο πάνελ. Θα παρακαλέσω όλους τους ομιλητές πριν ξεκινήσουμε να είναι όσο το δυνατόν πιο σύντομοι. Αυτό δεν σημαίνει να μην πει ο καθένας ό,τι θέλει, αλλά χωρίς πλατιασμούς, διότι 6-7 ομιλητές καταλαβαίνετε ότι δεν θα μείνει χρόνος για ερωτήσεις από εσάς και πάντα το σημαντικό κομμάτι των συζητήσεων, των συνεδρίων είναι κυρίως το κομμάτι που έχει να κάνει με την ανάδραση, με την συμμετοχή του ακροατηρίου, με τους ανθρώπους που θα μπουν στη συζήτηση. Εγώ θα πω απλώς τα ονόματα των ομιλητών και θα δώσω στη συνέχεια τον λόγο στον συντονιστή αυτής της συζήτησης, τον Jonatan Spire. Οι ομιλητές μας λοιπόν είναι ο Jonatan Steele, veteran foreign correspondent and author, United Kingdom. Είναι ο Evaggelos Aretaios, δημοσιογράφος, ο οποίος είναι στο άκρο δεξιό όπως κάθομαι εγώ, στα αριστερά σας εσάς, με πολύ συχνές επισκέψεις στην περιοχή, στο Διάρμπακυρ, στο Ερμπίλ και αλλού στη Συρία και θα μας δώσει τη δική του εικόνα για το τι έχει δει εκεί. Ο Yousif Mohammad Sadiq, President of the Kurdistan Parliament from Iraq. Ο Thomas Jeffrey Miley, Lecturer of Political Sociology in the Department of Sociology at Cambridge από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο. Ο Darnell Stephen Summers, βετεράνος του Vietnam Peace Activist από τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες. Και ο Michael Gunter, Professor in the Political Science Department at Tennessee Tech University των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών. Οι ομιλητές παρακαλώ ξανά να έχουν 7 λεπτά στη διάθεσή τους. Παρακαλώ κοιτάζετε το ρολόι έτσι ώστε να τελειώσουμε στον χρόνο που επιβάλλεται. Jonatan, ο λόγος σε σένα. Ευχαριστώ.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here for the second time at one of these conferences. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the Syrian conflict. If you forget the Palestinian-Israeli conflict for a moment, and of course it's rather hard to do that on the day after Donald Trump has provoked a new round of escalation. But if you do forget that conflict for a moment, the recent history of the Middle East as a whole has been remarkably free of external aggression and war. Tension between regional countries has frequently been bitter, but with 2 exceptions, both caused by the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, the various powers' rivalries have stopped short of unleashing outright war. Saddam's invasions of Iran in 1980 and Kuwait in 1990, and his attacks, of course, on the Kurds of Iraq were unique. So too was the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, a war which was entirely instigated and managed against a sovereign Arab country by an outside regional power. There was no direct involvement by Arab armies themselves. In 2011, things changed. The Syrian conflict turned a new page in the history of the modern Middle East. What began as an internal uprising became for the first time a war with massive external interference, giving rise to a new piece of terminology, the phrase proxy war. No foreign armies were openly engaged in Syria, but several foreign governments saw fit to militarize and expand the conflict by supporting and arming mercenaries and other non-state actors. It's an alarming precedent which threatens the peace of the entire region and creates massive difficulties and complications for those who would like to find diplomatic, political solutions. There have been 5 stages in the disastrous growth of outside intervention in Syria. Stage 1 involved Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE in funding and encouraging foreign fighters to move into Syria to confront the Syrian government army. They were supported, as we know, by Turkey, which allowed fighters to move freely along its border into Syria. We heard yesterday the famous quote from US Vice President Joe Biden. I'll just repeat part of it again today. In October 2014, he said, the Turks, the Saudis, the Emiratis, etc., what are they doing? They were so determined to take down Assad and essentially have a proxy Sunni-Shia war. What did they do? They poured hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of thousands of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad. Now, Biden's comments were an important confirmation of what had long been reported by journalists. But they were also disingenuous. He spoke as though the US was an innocent bystander in the Syrian conflict. In fact, the United States was just as much involved in the war as Turkey and the Gulf Arabs were. Along with Britain and France, the Americans had supported the armed insurgency from its outset. They tried to select groups of Syrian fighters who could be described as secular and non-sectarian rather than jihadis. And these included the so-called Free Syrian Army, even though it contained supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Sunni groups which had long opposed Assad's Alawite regime. It was not surprising that in order to counter this external interference, Russia, which was already Syria's main supplier of tanks, warplanes and other military equipment, stepped up its own arms deliveries to Assad. Iran also sent weaponry. From 2012 onwards, Iran and the Lebanese militia Hezbollah also sent fighters to help the Syrian army, initially as trainers, but increasingly in a combat role. Stage 2 of the foreign intervention in Syria began in the summer of 2014, when Barack Obama ordered the US Air Force to begin bombing in Syria and put together a coalition of European and Arab states to take part in the air campaign. The Syrian conflict had become not just a proxy conflict. It now involved the direct, illegal violation of a foreign country's sovereignty, since the US-led coalition had not been invited by the Syrian government, and nor did it have any UN Security Council backing. The US also took an interest in the Kurdish militias in Rojava in northern Syria, seeing them as the best boots on the ground to counter IS militants. IS, of course, had begun as an anti-US movement during the US occupation of Iraq. But with the departure of US troops, IS developed ambitions to become the principal defender of Sunni interests against the Shia-led government in Baghdad. And after 2012, it set itself the aim of seizing power in Syria as well. The US was caught in a dilemma of its own making. Should it prioritize the fight against Assad or the removal of the fight against IS or the removal of Assad? Throughout 2013 and 2014, it followed both these goals. The Kurds of northern Syria, the YPG and the YPJ militias, were supported as useful allies for both purposes. But from the summer of 2015, the US began to deploy its own special forces on the ground in Syria to arm and train the YPG and YPJ. Then came stage 3 of the Syrian conflict, at the end of September 2015, when Russia's President Vladimir Putin sent his own air force into action in a bid to help the Syrian army resist the advance of rebel forces in Syria's heartland, the north-south line of cities which runs from Aleppo through Hama and Homs to Damascus. As we know, the Russian intervention made a crucial contribution to Assad's fortunes. By the end of 2016, the Syrian government army, aided by Hezbollah and Iranian militias, had recaptured the rebel-held areas of Aleppo and Homs. Most of the Damascus suburbs were also brought back under government control. So what began as a conflict fought largely, at least on the rebel side, by non-state actors, had become a hybrid conflict. On the ground, foreign government special forces were in action, against non-state actors on the rebel side, while Russian and Iranian special forces and Hezbollah were helping the Syrian army. In the air, foreign air forces were also in action. But what made the conflict even more complex and dangerous was that while the US and Russian air forces ostensibly had the same goal, namely the destruction of ISIS, the US had still its second goal. It still hoped to see the removal of Assad. So the risk of clashes between the two air forces, the US and the Russian one, became ever present, and it remains so. Now let me come to stage 4 of the Syrian conflict, the insertion of Turkish forces. In August 2016, they entered northern Syria and captured the city of Evaggelos. In November 2016, there were further Turkish moves when their planes and artillery helped rebel forces seize the town of al-Bab. Turkey's invasion was not aimed primarily at supporting the rebels in their struggle against the Assad regime. The purpose was to prevent the Kurdish YPG and YPJ from linking Rojava to the largely Kurdish area of Afrin in northwestern Syria. If they succeeded, the Kurds would have forces along Turkey's entire southern border with Syria. Now, thanks to the Astana negotiating process, which brings Russia, Iran and Turkey together in an effort to work out local ceasefires, the Turks have now gained a third foothold. They have been authorized to set up a so-called de-escalation zone in the northwest province of Idlib. This gives them legal authority to deploy military police there. Finally, as if the role of foreign governments in the Syrian conflict wasn't big enough already, a new menace emerged in 2016. Long simmering tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran over several regional issues reached fever pitch. So in conclusion, let me come to the paradox of the Syrian conflict. Even as the intervention by outside powers has grown more intense, the actual course of the fighting on the ground has now become somewhat simpler. The power of Daesh, the so-called Islamic State, has been dramatically reduced. They've lost almost all the territory they'd won since 2014. The main beneficiaries have been the YPG and YPJ and the Kurds of Rojava, who have borne the brunt of the struggle against Daesh. But meanwhile, in the rest of Syria, major advances have been made against non-Daesh opposition forces by the Syrian government army and its allies. So this does potentially open the way for a peace deal between the Syrian opposition and the government, provided both sides are willing to make compromises. Of course, the opposition is in the weakest position, both on the battlefield and in terms of diplomacy. It will have to accept that Assad is going to stay in power, at least until the next Syrian elections, which are due in 2021. For his part, Assad should offer members of the opposition a share in power in some sort of government of national unity. Russia supports a compromise on these lines, but whether the opposition is willing to support a compromise depends on the US and its Gulf allies. They may prefer to continue a war of attrition against Assad rather than publicly admitting that they have failed in their main aim of toppling him. Accepting defeat is always hard. The Kurds face a separate dynamic. Their primary concern is not who governs in Damascus, but what sort of policy is pursued by the Syrian government, whatever that government consists of. Will Damascus accept that Syria's constitution needs to be reformed so as to permit a substantial degree of decentralization, which allows for autonomy for different regions of the country on a federal basis? Assad has made it clear that he wants to restore his sovereignty throughout the country, but his foreign minister Walid Muallim has also talked about the option of local autonomy. This shows at least that there is a debate going on in the highest regions in Damascus. Now, any talk of local autonomy, of course, upsets Turkey and is probably not welcome in Iran either. But is this a bargaining chip by Assad simply to get Kurdish forces to withdraw from Raqqa? How will the Trump administration react? There have already been reports that the US is cutting its military aid to the YPG and the YPJ. Will Washington press them to to give sovereignty in Raqqa back to the Assad regime, or will Washington insist first on actual significant concessions from Damascus before doing so? I'm sorry to raise so many questions and leave them unanswered, but we have to be realistic. The complexity of the Syrian conflict makes it hard to predict anything. But there are only three certainties. Three certainties. ISIS has been defeated. The Assad regime is winning the war in Syria's urban heartland. The third certainty is that however much the international context has changed in the last 12 months, the human tragedy facing Syrians of all ethnicities remains acute. Millions are still displaced from their homes. The material destruction of towns, cities and villages is huge. Thank you.
Much thanks to Jonathan Steele for that address, and much thanks also for sticking to the allotted time, Jonathan. The next speaker is Evaggelos Aretaios. Evaggelos is a Greek journalist who's been covering Turkey in the Kurdish area since 1999. From 1999 till 2007, he was permanently based in Istanbul, working as a senior correspondent for leading Greek newspapers and TV channels. And since 2007, he's divided his time between Brussels and Istanbul, covering Turkish and Kurdish affairs, as well as EU affairs. And Evaggelos is going to speak about regional and global power politics in the Iraq conflict. Evaggelos, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will try to limit myself to the Kurdish challenges and limits in the post-Islamic State era in Iraq. The gradual post-Islamic State era poses tremendous challenges to the Kurdish populations, but mainly to the different and often confrontational Kurdish leaderships in Syria, Iraq and Turkey, and to a wider extent Iran too. Northern Iraq could be seen as a micrography of the wider intra-Kurdish dynamics, although any comparisons should stay really limited. The Islamic State was a crucial factor in the recent history of the Kurds of the region because it was a total threat, a threat against the very existence of the Kurds, which surpassed all other threats that the Kurds have faced during their modern history. The Islamic State simply and terribly threatened the Kurds with extinction, with genocide. So, during the years of the Islamic State threat, the two big political forces of northern Iraq came closer together, Barzani's KDP and Talabani's PUK, and also the other political forces. The effect of this nightmarish threat posed by the Islamic State went even further and brought together, even if it was for a very brief moment, the two leading and often oppositional ideological and political forces in the Kurdish world, the PKK and Barzani's KDP. Nevertheless, this rapprochement was a very ephemeral one. Even during the fight against the Islamic State, the different Turkish groups were in tension between them for the control of certain areas and also for the very important city of Kirkuk. So this ideological and political diversity, as well as the fact that the biggest Kurdish political parties in northern Iraq are linked to familial structures and control specific areas, are one of the most serious obstacles against the emergence of a stable and viable democratic dynamic and eventually coherence amongst the Kurds in northern Iraq. The close relations and ideological links sometimes that both parties in northern Iraq, big parties, had with AKP's Turkey and with Iran also are crucial factors of the dynamics in northern Iraq, but also in the dynamics amongst the Kurds in a wider sense. The independence referendum in northern Iraq was the latest expression of this absence of coherence amongst the different groups and leaderships of the Kurds, but also of the shifting international and regional sands on which they have to live today, when the US is espousing a more and more cautious and ambiguous role in the region, while Russia and Iran are becoming the major players and factors. The referendum, stemming from the will and political needs of Masoud Barzani, and having been imposed, as some argue, to other Kurdish groups in northern Iraq, soon it managed to create another ephemeral sense of unity and wider national pride, mainly because or thanks to all the international reactions against it. The terrible setback some weeks after the referendum, with the striking attack and advance of Iraqi central forces and the Shia militias against the Kurdish groups in northern Iraq, showed once again that the biggest enemy of the Kurds are still themselves, and that the EU was terribly absent and in all these efforts and eventual crisis since years, not to mention the US. Today, with Erbil in a very difficult situation and with Soleimani also in dire straits, the prospects of the emergence of any dynamics towards unity and viable democratization dynamics seem rather limited. Iran's role in the region, together with the Russian factor, which is getting more and more important, do not leave any real space for such dynamics in the present situation. By saying that, one should not underestimate the fact that there are certain groups in the society, mainly amongst the younger generations, where progressivism and democracy are strong aspirations. Unfortunately, up to now, these groups were too small in numbers and influence and were not able to become centres of mobilisation or to find adequate political vehicles. If one could see a bigger picture in the Kurdish world, one could eventually say that the opening of Kurdish political forces to democratic and progressivist forces of the countries they live in seems to be the best process in order to enhance the necessary transformation of the Kurdish movements, something that the Kurdish political movement tried to do in Turkey when the People's Democratic Party opened its doors to the Turkish liberals and progressives between 2013 and 2015. This experiment died out not because of the Kurdish movement fault, but because of the other conditions in the country. The main problem with Iraq, as with Syria and Iran, is that the genuine democratic forces are marginal and really marginalized, while in Turkey the situation is today very difficult indeed, but also very different. In today's Iraq, with the fragmentation that has become deeper after the Kurdish referendum, it seems very difficult for an osmosis to take place between the progressive elements of the Kurds and the progressive elements of the rest of the Iraqi society. In that sense, the Kurds of Iraq will probably enter into a period of deeper fragmentation with difficulties to find a stable dynamic towards further democratization in a country which is and will be more and more under the influence of Iran and Russia, and with the EU and the US being almost terribly absent. Thank you very much.
Much thanks to Evaggelos for that intervention. The next speaker is His Excellency Yusuf Mohammad Sadiq, who is the Speaker of the Kurdistan Parliament. He was elected as the 7th Speaker on 29th April 2014. He's a member of the Goran movement, and he has PhD in political science from University of Slemania. And His Excellency Yusuf Mohammad Sadiq will speak on the subject of Kurdistan and post-ISIS challenges. Please go ahead.
زۆر سپاس بەڕێزان سپاس بۆیەوە سپاس بۆ ڕەخساندنیان دەرفەتە بۆ قسەکردن لەم سەکۆ گرنگە لە ڕاستیە لە دەستپێکەمەوێت هەمومان سڵاو بنێرین بۆ بەڕێز سەلاحەدین دەمێرتاش کە ئەمڕۆ دادگاییکردنیە و لە تورکیا دەست پێکە و هەروەها سڵاو بنێرین بۆ خاتوو یوکسەکداغ و هەموو پەرلەمانتارانی هەدەب کە بەداخەوە لە ماوەی ڕابردوو زیندانی کران و ئێستا پرۆسی دادگاییکردنیان دەست پێکە بە هەمان شێوە پێم خۆشە بە ناوی گەلی کوردستانەوە سوپاسی گەل و دەوڵەتان و یەکێتی ئەوروپا و هەموو دەوڵەتانی یەکێتی ئەوروپا بکەم کە لە شەڕ دژ بە گروپی تەرۆریستی داعش هاوکارمان بوون هاوکاری ئێمە لە باشووری کوردستان هاوکاری شەڕڤانان لە ڕۆژاوە کە هاوکاریەکانیشیان ڕۆڵێکی ئێجگار گرنگی هەبوو لە دژوەستانەوەی گروپی تەرۆریستی داعش. بە هەمان شێوە ئامادەبوون بۆ من لێرە جێگەی شانازیە یەکێتی ئەوروپا نمونە و بەڵگەی پێشکەوتنی مەزنی دموکراسی و ئاشتی و لێبوردەیی و پێکەوە ژیانە. بە هیواین وەکو ئەوروپا لە داهاتوودا ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بە ئاڕاستەیەکی وەها پێکەوە ژیانێک بڕوات و لەو پێناوەدا هەمووان دەتوانین ڕۆڵی گرنگمان هەبێت. بەڕێزان، ئێستای ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست هاوشێوەی ڕابردووی یەکێتی ئەوروپایە، ڕابردووی ئەوروپا کە چەند وڵاتێکی بەهێز لەناو ئەوروپا هەبوون، هەریەکانیان ویست هەژمونەتی خۆی بەسەر ئەوروپایە بسەپێنێ، بەڵام هەمویان دواتر لە ناوەندێکی لەم شێوەیە پێکەوە کۆبوونەوە و توانیان ڕێکخستنێکی ئابووری و سیاسی جیاواز بێن نەکایەوە. هیوادارین لە داهاتوودا لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستیش کە ئێستا دۆخێکی هاوشێوەی ڕابردووی ئەوروپای هەیە کە چەند دەوڵەتێک ئەیانەوێت هەژمونی خۆیان بەسەر ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بسەپێنن، دۆخێکی وا بێتەکایەوە کە ڕێخستنێکی لەم شێوەیە بێتەکایەوە کە هەمووان پێکەوە تایە بتوانن ڕۆڵی خۆیان ببینن لە پێکەوە ژیان لەو ناوچەیە. سەبارەت بە عێراق، هاوکات لەگەڵ شکستهێنان بە داعش پەیوەندیەکانی نێوان هەرێمی کوردستان و حکوومەتی ئیتحادی ڕۆشتە دۆخێکی ئێجگار خراپ و ئێستا لە خراپترین ئاستیدایە لە 2003ەوە. ئەمەش بۆ ئێمە و هاوپەیمانان ناومێدکەر بوو، چونکە هێزەکانی عێراق و هێزەکانی پێشمەرگە پێکەوە لە سەنگەرەکانی ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی تێرۆر پێکەوە جەنگان و سەرکەوتنی گەورەشان بەدەستێنا. ڕووداوەکانی ئەم دواییەی کوردستان ڕووداوی زۆر سەخت و ناخۆش بوون. خەڵکی کوردستان ئەمڕۆ لە دۆخێکی زۆر سەختدا دەژین لە هەموو ڕوویەکەوە. بۆ چارەسەری نزیک مەودای ئەم دۆخە جارە پێش هەر شتێک پێویستە دۆخی ناوچە جەناکۆکەکان هێور بکرێتەوە بۆ دەستپێکردنی قۆناغێکی نوێ و زەمینە بسازێت بۆ دانوستان. دەبێت بە زووترین کات دۆخی سەربازی کۆتایی پێبهێنرێت بە دیاریکراوی لە پارێزگای کەرکووک و شارەکانی دووس خورماتۆ و مەخمور و شەنگال. ئێوە ڕەنگە ئاگادار بن کە دوێنێ هێرشێکی هەوایی کرایە سەر کەمپی مەخمور کە بەڕاستی ئەمە زۆر بۆ ئێمە جێگەی داخە. بە هەمان شێوەیە وازانن لە شەنگال خەڵکی کوردی ئێزیدی لە سەردەمی داعش ڕوبەڕووی جەنۆساید بوونەوە و ئێستا لە ئەنجامی ئەم گرژانی دواییش خەڵکەکەی ئەو ناوچەیە دیسانەوە ڕوبەڕووی ڕاوەدونان و ڕوبەڕووی کۆچکردن بوونەتەوە لە ماڵ و حاڵی خۆیان. ناکۆکیە سیاسیەکانی نێوان بەغدا و هەولێر وەکو مێژوو پێمانەڵێت بە شەڕ و توندوتیژی چارەسەر نابێت. دەبێت هەموو کوردانەی لەسەر ماڵ و حاڵی خۆیان و دەرنراون دەست بەجێ بگەڕێنرێنەوە سەر ماڵ و حاڵی خۆیان و عەدالەتی ئینتقالی جێبەجێ بکرێت. کورد و کوردی ئێزیدی و تورکمان و عەرەب و کریستیانەکان بۆ سەدان ساڵ بەڵکو بۆ هەزاران ساڵیشە بە شێوەیەکی ئاشتیانە لەم ناوچەیە پێکەوە ژین. ئەمڕۆ لەبەر گۆڕانی دۆخی سیاسی نابێت ببنە دوژمنی یەکتر. هەروەها حکوومەتی فدرالی دەبێت ڕێگری بکات لە هەموو جۆرە سزادانێکی گشتی بۆ خەڵکی کوردستان بەهۆی سەرکێشی سیاسیەکانیەوە. لە مێژووی دنیادا هەرگیز سزادانی گەلان لەبەر هەڵسوکەوتی سیاسیان دەرەنجامی باشی نەبووە. هەمومان کتێبە بەناوبانگەکەی کین زمان لەیادە لەم بارەیەوە کە پاش کۆنفرانسی ئاشتی ڤێرسای نووسی. بەڵام ئەرکی سەرەکی ئێمە لە ناوەوەی کوردستانە. ئێمە بە تەواوی هاوڕین لەگەڵ سیاسەتی یەکێتی ئەوروپا کە جەخت لەسەر چارەسەری هۆیەکانی سەرهەڵدانی تیرۆر ئەکاتەوە لە سەردەمی دوای داعش. ئێمە چیدی ناتوانین وەک چارەکە سەدەی ڕابردوو بەردەوام بین. یەکێک لە هۆکارە سەرەکیەکانی ئەم دۆخە نالەبارە ئەوەیە کە ئێمە بەباشی لە ڕۆڵی خۆمان و پێگەی خۆمان تێنەگەیشتوین لە ناوچەکەدا. هەروەها بە شێوەیەکی سەردەمیانە حکومڕانی ناکەین. لەسەر و هەموویەوە نەمانتوانیوە و ڕێگە نەدراوە کە سیستمێکی وەها لە کوردستان بنیاد بنرێت کە شەفاف بێت، دوور بێت لە بەرژەوەندی شەخسی و حزبی و لە پێناوی خەڵکدا بێت و گەندەڵ نەبێت. لە دەرەنجامی ئەمەش دەیان ملیارد دۆلاری سامانی گشتی لەلایەن دەستەبژێرێکی کەمی حکومڕانەوە دەستی بەسەرداگیراوە. لەمڕۆ من لێرەوە ڕای دەگەێنم کە بە تەواوی پشتیوانی لە هەوڵەکانی سەرۆکوەزیرانی عێراق بەڕێزعەبادی دەکەین بۆ ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی گەندەڵی. داوا دەکەین کە جەنگی دژی گەندەڵی کە هیچی کەمتر نییە لە جەنگی دژی تێرۆر هەمەلایەنە و گشتگیر بێت و کەسی لێ هەڵاوێرد نەکرێت چ لەسەر ئاستی عێراق و چ لەسەر ئاستی هەرێمی کوردستان. داواش لە یەکێتی ئەوروپا و کۆمەڵگای نێودەوڵەتیەکەین کە بۆ جایەتی گەندەڵی هاوکارمان بن، هاوکاری هەموو هێز و لایەنە عێراقی و کوردستانیانە بن کە بۆ مەبەستە کار دەکەن. لە ڕاستیدا گەندەڵی هۆکاری سەرەکی ناسەقامگیریە لە سەرتاپای عێراقدا. ئەمە لە کوردستانیش فاکتەرێکی سەرەکی خراپی حکومڕانی و بەهەدەردانی سامانی خەڵکە و ئەو دۆخە سەختە ئابووریەی هێناوەتەکایەوە کە ئەمڕۆ زۆرینەی خەڵکی کوردستانی تێدا دەژین. هەر لەبەر ئەم هۆیەش دایان هەزار هاوڵاتی وڵاتەکەی ئێمە ڕوبەڕووی کۆچ بوونەوە و کۆچیان کرد بەرەو دەرەوە بە تایبەتی بۆ ئەوروپا. هێنانەوەی ئەو پارانەی کە بەهۆی گەندەڵیەوە چۆتە گیرفانی دەسەڵاتداران بۆ خەزانەی گشتی دەسمایەیەکی باش دەبێت بۆ دووبارە بنیاتنانەوەی ناوچەوێران بووەکان لە دوای شەڕی تیرۆر و ئەگەر ئەم پرۆسەیە سەر بگرێت ڕەنگە عێراق و هەرێمی کوردستان پێویستیان بە هیچ هاوکاریەکی نێودەوڵەتی نەبێت. هەڵبەت گەندەڵی بۆشاییەکی ئەمنی و سیاسی گەورەش دروست ئەکات کە گروپە تۆرۆریستیەکان ئەتوانن بیقۆزنەوە. ڕیشەکێشکردنی گەندەڵی و کۆتایی هێنان بە خراپی حکومڕانی پێویستی بە تۆکمەکردنی دەستگا هەیە. لە سەرووی هەموویەوە هەبوونی پەرلەمانێکی سەروەر کە بێ هیچ ڕێگریەک بتوانێت چاودێری هەموو دەسەڵاتی جێبەجێکردن بکات و لێپرسینەوەی لەگەڵدا بکات. هەڵبەت بەهێزکردنی دەسەڵاتی دادوەریش لە ناو دڵی ئەم پرۆسە گرنگەدایە. بۆ بەرجەستەبوونی ئەمانە پێویستە دەستورێک هەبێت نەک وەک دەقێکی نووسراو بەڵکو وەک پەیماننامەیەک کە پەیوەندی نێوان دەسەڵاتەکان و پەیوەندی نێوان ئەم دەسەڵاتانە و خەڵک بە شێوەیەکی دموکراسی و دامەزراوەی ڕێک بخات. هەوڵ بدەین دۆخێک بهێنینەکایەوە لە ڕووی سیاسی و ئابووری و کۆمەڵایەتیەوە کە خەڵکی کوردستان بتوانن بە باشترین شێوە پێکەوە بن، چونکە تەنها لەسەر ئەم بنەمایە دەتوانین قسە لەسەرەوە بکەین کە چۆن لەگەڵ دراوسەکان و دنیادا پێکەوە هاوکاریمان هەبێت بۆ پێکەوە پەیوەندیمان هەبێت. لە هەمان کاتدا ئاڵنگاریەکی گرنگی تر چ پەیوەست بە هەرێمی کوردستان و عێراقیش بە شێوەیەکی گشتی بریتیە لە کۆتایی هێنان بە دەستێوەردانی سیاسی و حزبی و شەخصی و تایەفی لە کاروباری هێزە چەکدارەکان و بە پیشەییکردنی ئەم هێزە چەکدارانە بە شێوەیەک کە بە دوور بخرێنەوە لە ململانەیە سیاسیەکان. چونکە گەرکارێکی وەهانەکەین ئەوە هەموو کات ئەگەری سەرهەڵدانی شەڕی ئەهلی بوونی دەبێت. دۆخەکە مەترسیدارتر دەبێت ئەگەر سەرنج بدەین لە توندبوونی ململانەیە ئیقلیمیەکان و ئەگەری سەرهەڵدانی شەڕی بە وەکالەت لە نێوان دەوڵەتە باڵادەستەکانی ناوچەکە و جیهان. لەلایەکی ترەوە پێویستە بە میتۆدێکی جیاواز لە ڕابردوو هەم حکوومەتی فدرالی عێراق و هەم هەرێمی کوردستان هەوڵی چارەسەرکردنی کێشەکانی نێوانیان بدەن. پێمان وایە کە ئەگەر بەرژەوەندی گشتی و هاوبەش و بەرژەوەندی هاوڵاتیان پێش بەرژەوەندی تایبەت و شەخصی و حزبی بخرێت ئەوە چارەسەری کێشە و گرفتەکان زۆر ئاسانتر دەبێت. دەستوری عێراقیش بۆ زۆر لە کێشەکان و بۆ زۆر لە گرفتەکان ڕێگا چارە و نەخشە ڕێگای چارەسەری داناوە. گەر عێراق و هەرێم مافی هاوڵاتی بوون بچەسپێنن ئەوانە کۆکیەکان زۆر خاوتر دەبنەوە تا دموکراسیش زیاتر بچەسپێت ئەگەرەکانی سەرهەڵدانی شەڕ و ململانەی تر کەمتر دەبنەوە. وەک زانراویشە سیستەمە دموکراسیەکان بەدەگمەن شەڕی یەکتر دەکەن. لە ئاستێکی تردا کوردستان میراتگیری شارستانیەتە دیێرینەکانی مێزۆپۆتامیایە و لە ناو دڵی کلتور و شارستانیەتەکانی ناوچەکەدایە. شوێنگەی ئێمە لە هەمان کاتدا وەک شوێنگەی دڵی هەر سێ شارستانیەتە گەورەکەی تری ناوچەکەشە، عەرەب و فارس و تورک. هەرێکە لەم شارستانیانش بە شێوازی جیاواز و زۆر جاریش هاوشێوە کاریگەریان هەیە لەسەر ئێمە. لە هەمان کاتدا ئێمە لەگەڵ ئەم کەلتور و شارستانیانەدا هاوبەشی زۆرمان هەیە. ئەم خەسڵەتە جوغرافیە خەسڵەتێکی نەگۆڕە لە بوونی ئێمە. دەبێت ئێمە لەگەڵیدا مامەڵە بکەین و بیکەینە بنەمای داڕشتنی سیاسەتی خۆمان و پەیوەندیمان لەگەڵ دراوسەکانماندا ڕێبخەینەوە لەسەر ئەم بنەمایە. بوونی پەیوەندیەکی هاوسان و هاوسەنگ و دامەزراو لەسەر بەرژەوەندی هاوبەش و نەبوون بە بەشێک لە ململانەی ئیقلیمیەکان لە قازانجی هەرێمی کوردستان و سەقامگیری ناوچەکەشە. بەڕێزان، وەک بەرپرسە ئەوروپاییەکان دووپاتی دەکەنەوە کە ئاسایشی یەکێتی ئەوروپا لەسەر دراوسەکانیان وەستاوە. عێراق و کوردستانیش دراوسێی یەکێتی ئەوروپان. ئێمە پێشوازی دەکەین لەو هەوڵانەی کە یەکێتی ئەوروپا دەیدات بۆ دەستپێکردنەوەی دانوستان لە نێوان هەرێم و بەغدادا. هەروەها ئەو هەوڵ و تێگەیشتنیان بەرز دەنرخێنین کە دەیانەوێت ڕەگ و ڕیشەی تیرۆر دەستنیشان بکەن و هەوڵی بنبڕکردنیان بدەن. لێرەدا جێگای خۆیەتی دووپاتی بکەینەوە کە ئێستا کاتی پلانی درێژخایەن و هەمەلایەنەیە بۆ ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی تیرۆر و زەمینەی تیرۆر لەسەر ئاستی سیاسی و ئابووری و کۆمەڵایەتی و فکریەوە. ئەم کارە فرەلایەنە کە بۆ هەردوو لا بەسوودە تەنها بە هەماهەنگی هەردوو لا دەبێت. گەر تیرۆر و ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی تیرۆر لە یەکی نزیک کردینەوە دەبێت بە هەمان شێواز و بە هەمان گۆڕ قۆناغی پاش تیرۆر و هەروەها ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی گەندەڵی ئەم نزیکایەتیە پەرە پێبدات. کارکردن بۆ بنیاتنانی دازگاکانی دەوڵەت ئەو ڕێگە چارە ڕاستەقینەیە کە ماوەیەکی زۆرە ئێمە داوای دەکەین و جەختی لەسەر دەکەینەوە. ئێستا خۆشحاڵین کە لەسەر زاری بەرپرسانی یەکێتی ئەوروپاوە گوێبیستی دەبین. کۆچ و تیرۆر ئەوەی دووپات کردەوە کە ناسەقامگیری لە ناوچەکەی ئێمە کاریگەری لەسەر ئەوروپاش دەبێت. هەر بۆیەش بە دڵنیایی تەواوە دەڵێم سەقامگیری دوورمەودا لە ناوچەکەی ئێمە بەرژەوەندی هاوبەشە و پێویستە کاری بۆ بکەین. تەنها ڕێگای بەدەستهێنانی سەقامگیریش دیموکراتیزەکردنە لە ڕێگەی بەهێزکردنی دەسەڵاتی دادوەری و حکمی یاسا و زەمانەتکردن و پاراستنی ئازادە سیاسی و مەدەنیەکان و بنیاتنانی دەسەڵاتێکی یاسادانانی بەهێز و گەشەپێدانی مرۆیی و ئابووری و ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی گەندەڵی. ئەمەش ئامانجی استراتیژی ئێمەیە بۆ هەرێمی کوردستان، چوەک سەرۆکی پەرلەمان و چوەک پارتەکەم بزوتنەوەی گۆڕان. لەم ڕێگایەوە دەتوانین بنەمای بەهێزکردنی پەیوەندیەکانی نێوان هەرێمی کوردستان و یەکێتی ئەوروپاش زیاتر بەهێز بکەین و لەسەر بنەمای بەهای هاوبەش و بەرژەوەندی هاوبەش پەیوەندیەکانمان پەرە پێ بدەین. زۆر سپاس.
Much thanks to Yusuf for that intervention. I'm asked by the translators to ask of all the speakers to speak slowly. Apparently this makes their vital job more easily performed, and I shall try and stick to that admonition myself. The next speaker is Dr. Thomas Jeffrey Miley. Thomas is a lecturer in political sociology at the Department of Sociology at the University of Cambridge. He's lectured at Yale University, Wesleyan University, St. University and others. His research interests include comparative nationalisms and empirical democratic theory. His current project is on comparative struggles for self-determination in the 21st century, and he's published widely on dynamics of nationalist conflict and accommodation in Spain and also in Turkey. And Thomas will speak on the subject of the war on terror, the refugee crisis and the crisis of Europe. Thomas, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak in this forum about such an important issue, the question of the war on terror and its relationship to the refugee crisis and what we say a crisis of European values. People talked yesterday about NATO as a community of values. The European Union likes to think of itself as a community of values standing up for human rights and democracy, but I think that the recent events show a darker side or an uglier side of what the European project has become, what the NATO project certainly is about, and what it means for people struggling for self-determination in the way that the Kurdish movement is valiantly struggling for an alternative to the tyranny and chaos in the Middle East, but also around the globe. The tyranny unleashed by the contradictions of capitalist modernity, as Abdullah Öcalan would put it. But I want to focus on what's happening in Europe, because what's happening on Europe is ultimately also very crucial for the plight of the Kurds in Turkey, but also the plight of the Kurds in Europe. A first piece of news which I think is very indicative of what's happening, is the stabbing of a mayor in a small town in Germany less than a month ago. It was politically motivated stabbing of the mayor, and it was motivated by the fact that this mayor had stood up taken a stance in favor of refugees. And this comes on the heels of the unprecedented success in the elections of the neo-fascist right in Germany, which is not an isolated incident in the European context. We have a resurgent, xenophobic, racist, nationalist right that is resurgent in Denmark, in France, in Hungary, in Poland, in Finland, in Austria, in Sweden, in Greece. Not to mention Brexit, where I'm living in the United Kingdom, and the United States with Donald Trump, where I'm a citizen. So this is a global trend, this rise of a resurgent neo-fascist right in the heart of these communities that present themselves as the standard bearers of human rights and democracy. And this is a systemic problem. It's not isolated, it's happening across, and it's linked to two issues. Two policies which are firmly entrenched. The first being policies of, let's say, policies of plutocratic plunder. So the plutocrats colluding to undermine the historic class compromise that marked the era of the post-war period in Europe during the more benevolent side and story of the European project of expanding social rights, expanding welfare state, et cetera, et cetera. So this more benevolent image of the European state and what Europe stands for is being undermined by a politics of neoliberal austerity, we'll call it plutocratic plunder on the one hand, and then also crucially the warmongering that's been going on for the last 2 decades now, at least. The war on terror, which is it's an Orwellian war on terror, and I want to hone in and talk about the ramifications of the insidious logic of the war on terror and how it affects the Kurdish freedom movement in particular. But with respect to the refugee crisis, to get into the refugee crisis, what we see is particularly indicative is the dirty deal between the European Union and President Erdogan, which is now a year and a half into existence, and it's a dirty deal which, in many respects, undermines a story which was a more benevolent story of a European Union which was holding a carrot of accession in front of the Turkish state, urging the Turkish state, or this is the story, urging the Turkish state to converge with democratic norms, human rights norms, etc. This is, I think, an oversimplification. I'll have more things to say about what the real record of the European Union is in the dynamics in Turkey. But nevertheless, there was some element of truth in this, and now this has been reversed very much, and we see a state of affairs where there is much conflict between the European Union and Turkey, but also a situation in which President Erdogan has an ability to blackmail the European Union with respect to this question of, given the toxic ideological climate in Europe and this idea that there can be no more refugees in Europe, even though in reality a very small number of refugees in the globe are in the rich countries in general and in the European Union in particular. I think the figures are 85% of global refugees are in so-called developing countries. So what that means is in the countries that did a lot to cause the problems in the places where people are fleeing from, and that in these countries as well that have the most resources, there's the least amount of political will to deal with this refugee question. And in fact, at a moment where you have a severe authoritarian derivation or authoritarian turn in Turkish politics, that President Erdogan has a kind of a stick that he can leverage against the European Union. So what does this dirty deal between the European Union and Turkey mean in practice? In practice, a third piece of news in the news the last couple of weeks. There's a human rights catastrophe going on the islands off the islands of Greece. In which just 2 weeks ago, or last week in fact, Human Rights Watch and among 20 human rights organizations decrying the human rights situation of these overburdened camps, these refugee camps in the heart of Europe, where Human Rights Watch, a coordinator quoted in the Guardian last week, says, "This remains a matter of life and death. There is absolutely no excuse for the conditions on the islands right now. Thousands of people crammed into overcrowded and desperately under-resourced facilities. We are in a race against time. Lives will be lost again this winter unless people are allowed to move in an organized and voluntary fashion to the mainland." And this situation of these human rights atrocities happening inside of Europe with respect to the treatment of refugees is part and parcel of this deal with Turkey, which is linked to an attempt ultimately to keep refugees out of Europe at all costs. And so what does it mean to keep refugees out of Europe? It means that refugees will be elsewhere, obviously also in Turkey, close to 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. And what is the plight of the refugees in Turkey? This, according to the European Commission. The European Commission estimates, has a report on this, is concerned about some sort of lip service, at least, to the human rights situation of these refugees. Estimates from the World Food Program suggest that as many as 1 in 3 of refugees in Syria or in Turkey are below the survival threshold. This means that refugees are not able to cover their most basic needs. And meanwhile, in Turkey, for the last 2 years, there's been tight controls put on the border to stem the flow of refugees into Turkey. And what this has done is it exposed civilians fleeing from human rights atrocities to more human rights atrocities, to the dangers of irregular crossings and smuggling networks. Now, another interesting thing that the European Commission notes is that when we talk about refugees in Turkey, it's not only Syrian refugees in Turkey, but there are also, in the last 2 years, there's been a massive wave of Kurdish refugees in Turkey, refugees who are fleeing their homes in the southeast of Turkey, from the Kurdish region in Turkey, because of the war that's been unleashed on the Kurdish population in Turkey. So estimates around 500,000 or 500,000 people have fled. And this, of course, also affects the Syrian refugees who are displaced once and find themselves in the midst of another war. And so what we see is the war on terror, this catastrophic war on terror, which has brought so much chaos to the Middle East, spilling over into Turkey and also undermining the peace process in Turkey with grave human rights consequences, not only for Syrian refugees but also for the victims of fleeing from state terror by the Turkish state against its own citizens in Turkey. We've already heard the salutations going out to co-chair Demirtas. Let me just say something a little bit more about the persecution the persecution and plight of the Kurdish freedom movement, not only in Turkey but also in Europe. Because when we talk about the European Union as a community of values, let us not forget that for decades now, the Kurdish freedom movement has been persecuted in Europe as well. And this is linked to the insidious logic of the war on terror. And the Kurdish movement finds itself at the core of this war on terror logic and victims of this war on terror logic in Europe. Last year, as a member of the Imrali delegations, I was in Strasbourg with other delegates, trying to intervene, to witness, and also to talk to the people in the Council of Europe about the situation. And I just want to end to get us to think a little bit about the deeper issues, because when we think about this story, there's a longer history, and then there's what's happening now. And just make these 2 points. The longer history, so in that benevolent story of the European Union giving removing the carrot of accession in order for human rights compliance with human rights norms, it's often forgotten that at the same time that this stuff is happening over the course of the 90s into the 2000s, that particularly in the 1990s, it was German arms, German tanks that were crushing Kurdish villages. So at the same time that they're telling the story about human rights and demanding human rights compliance, there's a longer history of complicity with the state terror exercised against the Kurdish freedom movement. We see this. So we were in the Imrali delegation was in Strasbourg the day that the resolution was passed to put Turkey back under the monitoring process. And I just want to end with some discussion about the limits linked to this insidious logic of the war on terror that traps the European Union and makes it impossible for the European Union to speak with anything close to moral clarity about what's going on in Kurdistan. So our delegation arrived in Strasbourg on the morning of the 25th of April, just in time to witness the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe debate and pass this resolution in favor of reopening the human rights monitoring procedure for Turkey. The resolution was framed as expressing serious concerns about democracy and human rights. The vote in its favor deemed an unprecedented decision meant to put pressure on the EU to reassess relations with Ankara. But on the issue of the end of the peace process and the still escalating conflict between the Turkish state and the Kurdish freedom movement, the Council's resolution was anything but unprecedented. Instead, it perpetrated false equivalences and showed that the European Union and the Council of Europe remain trapped in the limitations and contradictions of the lethally inept paradigm of the war on terror. So the group of the United European Left proposed a formal amendment to this resolution where the issue of terror is explicitly addressed. Specifically, paragraph 5 of the draft resolution read, quote, Turkey has faced massive and repeated terrorist attacks perpetrated by the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and the PKK-affiliated Kurdistan Freedom Hawks. These attacks caused hundreds of casualties in Ankara, Zurich, Istanbul, Bursa, Diyarbakir, Kayseri, and other cities in Turkey. In addition, the border city of Kilis was targeted by shelling from Syrian territory. The Assembly unequivocally condemns these attacks and all terrorist action and violence perpetrated by the PKK, Daesh, or any other organization which can by no means be tolerated. So that's a clear equivalence between the PKK and Daesh is made here, according to the Council of Europe's amendment. Now, the amendment proposed by the United European Left would have taken the PKK out of this condemnation, and instead included a sentence that says the Assembly regrets that the peace process between the Turkish government and the PKK has ended, leading to a vicious circle of violence and many casualties. The Assembly urges on all sides of the conflict to resume the peace process in order to reach a peaceful solution to the conflict. But the amendment did not pass. Evidently, for the committee in charge of drafting the resolution, as well as for the majority in the Parliamentary Assembly, any official distinction between the PKK and ISIS remains unpalatable. The situation the PKK, and by extension the Kurdish freedom movement, thus finds itself in is indeed surreal, reflecting more than the mere truism that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. For in effect, the PKK and the Kurdish freedom movement have come to be considered, in the eyes of the very same people, freedom fighters on one side of the border in Syria, terrorists on the other in Turkey. Reference to a vicious circle of violence is explicitly rejected, even amidst a brutal wave of state terror that has led to 500,000 displaced Kurds. When it comes to the Turkish state's war with the PKK and on the Kurdish people, the Council of Europe still obstinately reserves its unequivocal condemnations for non-state actors alone. And as for pressure to restart the peace process with the PKK, it remains off the agenda for now, manifestly beyond the Assembly's mandate and horizons. Let me just end with one more incident in the that we witnessed when we were there, which is we had a chance to just talk to the Human Rights Commissioner. And the Human Rights Commissioner, who was in Turkey twice in 2016, once before the failed coup in April, once just after in August. And it is clear that he has been following the events very closely since. Indeed, 2 days before our meeting, on the same day that the resolution was passed, he had published his third report on the human rights situation in Turkey, two of which focus on counterterrorism measures and the curfews in municipalities across the Kurdish region, one on the Erdogan government's crackdown on freedom of expression and on the media. This third report was submitted to the European Court of Human Rights as a third-party intervention in relation to 34 cases associated with the counterterrorism measures and the curfews, and contains a clear denunciation of violations of, quote, the protection of the right to life, the lack of effective investigations and the problem of impunity, restrictions on relatives paying their last respects to their deceased family members, and undue interference with the work of human rights defenders. So all that sounds like some moral clarity. However, the Commissioner's report nevertheless qualifies this denunciation somewhat by also including mention of, quote, the severe terrorist threat faced by Turkey, recognizing, quote, the right and duty of the Turkish state to fight against terrorism in all its forms, and by referring to, quote, the deteriorating security situation in southeastern Turkey, which included the building of trenches and barricades by armed terrorist groups in certain neighborhoods, which preceded the declaration of the curfews in urban centers. Moreover, the report ends with an acknowledgement of, quote, the predicament of the Turkish authorities and the Turkish security forces who have the duty to fight against terrorism, before recalling, quote, that in this fight they should show much higher regard to the human rights of populations affected by the measures they take and ensure that all allegations are promptly, adequately, and effectively investigated by the judicial authorities with a view to enforcing laws and maintaining the principle of the rule of law. In effect, and with this I'll conclude, the report thus calls for a more humane, more proportional waging of the war on terror. But though the report does refer to the legacy of the armed confrontation between Kurdish separatists and the Turkish security forces, nowhere are the underlying issues of injustice that have motivated the Kurdish movement and continue to motivate the Kurdish freedom movement anywhere addressed by the Commissioner of Human Rights. So what we see is bound by a conflation of the logic of might and the logic of right, and false equivalences between different kinds of groups, as well as a hiding with respect to speaking with moral clarity about the reality of state terror. And so this is, I think, part and parcel of a European Union, a Council of Europe, and the Western countries, all caught in this paradigm of the war on terror, which is bringing the chickens home to roost in Europe, but also more generally. This is the end. So also more generally, with respect to the plight of the Kurdish freedom movement. So.
Much thanks to Thomas for that intervention. The next speaker is Darnell Stephen Summers. Darnell Stephen Summers is a journalist, a filmmaker, and a musician, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1966, and served also stateside in Germany, in Vietnam, and soon became an ardent anti-war spokesman and political activist. He was a founding member of the Malcolm X Cultural Center, a member of the Black Workers' Congress, and also associated with the Black Panther Party. In 1968, Darnell was targeted by the infamous COINTELPRO and arrested in Vietnam, accused of killing a Michigan State Red Squad police detective while on leave in Michigan from his deployment in Vietnam. He's lived in Berlin and has been an anti-war activist internationally for several decades now. And he's been instrumental in organising the Stop the War Brigade in Germany. And Darnell's going to speak to us about the anti-war struggle and the democratic and federal model. Before he begins, just once again to ask Darnell, because the translators again said their job is made difficult if we speak too quickly, so please speak slowly so everybody can get to hear what you have to say. Darnell, please go ahead.
I'm a member of the Stop the War Brigade and the Vietnam Veterans Against the War OSS. We organize active duty soldiers and veterans from all armies who are opposed to all wars of aggression, plunder, and domination. It's an honor to be here at this event organized by forces in the Kurdish freedom movement. As a black man from the belly of the beast, I have a special affinity for the oppressed of other nations, in particular
with the Kurds, who have been brutally subjugated by NATO's Gladio, the secret enforcers of NATO. I, too, have had my run-ins with NATO's Gladio. I will never forget the hospitality and warm greeting that the Turkish and Kurdish activists gave me in 1982 upon my return to Germany to visit my family while still falsely charged with the murder of a police agent in America. NATO's Gladio, the secret enforcers of NATO. From some things that people have said here, it sounds as if the Kurdish movement and the United States are friends. Let us not forget that NATO's Gladio and the role of NATO's Gladio in the oppression and the human rights atrocities over decades. As Abdullah Öcalan emphasized, NATO's Gladio is the real ruler. Not only that, but we must not forget that NATO's Gladio was behind the abduction of Abdullah Öcalan in Kenya. In 1999, after being rejected asylum by many countries and then kidnapped by NATO, Öcalan came to truly see and understand that the enemy was not only Turkey but also the capitalist world system. His capture, he realized, had been arranged by Israel, the USA, Russia, and the European Union. Meanwhile, the role of the Turkish state was only secondary. As Öcalan explained in his first volume of his book, Civilization, the role has been assigned to Turkey to be the vulgar gendarme, the watchdog, the prison guard of all Middle Eastern peoples in order to make them more susceptible to the oppression and exploitation of the capitalist system. My duty and task as a Vietnam veteran is to convey to all, in no uncertain terms, the true nature and horror of the U.S.-NATO instigated conflicts and the unbearable suffering that they and their allies have brutally imposed upon humanity. This is a fight for our very survival on this planet, our only home. There's a quote I would like to share with you, and this quote is from a U.S. Marine general. He is a two-time recipient of the coveted Medal of Honor, which is bestowed upon the bravest of the brave, General Smedley. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service. And during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of a half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1902 through 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped to see to it that the Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. General Smedley Butler, U.S. Marines. General Smedley's statement is powerful and dangerous. It speaks to a truth that no one wants to hear. That leaves you 2 choices. Either act accordingly or ignore the cold, hard truth. General Smedley's message is clear to me. No one should cooperate with such a government. You put your cause at great risk when you consort with them. They cannot be trusted, and they have demonstrated that time and time again throughout history. General Smedley was talking about events, some of which transpired more than 100 years ago. Fast forward to today, and what we are witnessing is the strategic importance of the oil-rich Kirkuk area and the potential for exploiting other vast mineral deposits of the region and beyond. The imperialists need raw materials for their machine to maintain their way of life. Winner takes all. Keep that in mind as we continue. The U.S. military has a long history of soldiers in its own ranks criticizing and fighting actively against U.S. national and foreign policy. It's happening right now. I'm proud to say that I belong to that group of soldiers and veterans. I can say without reservation that I represent the sentiments and interests of many who are actively serving in the military and veterans, of course. A friend of mine asked me a few weeks ago a very difficult question. What was the other alternative to cooperating with the U.S. coalition in the battle for Kobani? For me, any cooperation with thieves and murderers is not an option. It is out of the question. But it seems that a few may find a rationalization to justify coalescing with the U.S. band of criminals. What would be worse than knowing that you're going to be betrayed and realizing there's nothing you can do about it, but you acquiesce in the fraud? Even worse is not to know that your betrayal is inevitable, that it's going to happen, and you have no idea about the impending crisis, and you don't have a clue as to what to do. You're just ignoring history. In the end, you're just looking at the problem through the bottom of a Coke bottle. Everything is distorted and out of focus. I was born in Detroit in 1947, a black baby born into a racist society with all that that implies. Relatively speaking, that's a long time ago, but for me, it feels like yesterday. I grew up in a society that I would grow to despise. I grew up in a society full of hate and hypocrisy that didn't appreciate or accept my worth as a human being just because of the color of my skin. Not everyone felt that way, but it was the system that gave life to this horrible ordeal. Those conditions can either literally destroy you, and yes, many were destroyed, or inspire you to fight back and end the misery and the system of oppression. We have a term in America, Indian giver. It literally means that you give with one hand and you take back with the other. I first heard that term as a child, and it was part of my vocabulary. I and my little playmates used this despicable term. It was part of the culture. We heard it in the cowboy movies and on television, watching as white men depicted themselves as righteous saviors while slaughtering the indigenous peoples for the good of humanity. That's the way it was presented. Take a look. If someone didn't keep his word or stole from his friends, he was an Indian giver. We didn't know it then, but it wasn't long before we learned through our own experience the Indian giver was the U.S. government. The U.S. presently houses 25% of the world's prison population, with the vast majority being of people of color, 1.5 million blacks, 600,000 Latinos, and 200,000 whites at last count, around 2002. That represents at least 25% of the world's prison population, while only being 5% of the world's population. How can this be? America consistently leads the world in violent death by gun violence. 100,000 are either shot dead or seriously wounded as a result of that situation. America is a society constantly at war with itself. So it is no small wonder that that situation would bleed over to the rest of the world, leaving death and destruction in its wake. Conservatively speaking, the U.S. consumes half of the world's resources just to keep that wasteful juggernaut rolling. I mention these facts to set the stage for the understanding of the nature of the entity that poses and self-proclaims itself as a protector and leader of the free world. Nothing could be further from the truth. So what role do they play? It is interesting to note the analysis being disseminated by some in the Western media. For instance, Trudy Rubin, syndicated columnist, writes, "A record of abandoning one's allies can come to haunt the betrayer, the U.S. So the time for Washington to act on the Kurdish question is now. The Iraqi Kurds' dream of independence, endorsed by a Kurdish referendum last month, have come to a crushing halt. This week, the hostile Baghdad government clawed back the key oil town of Kirkuk from Kurdish forces, along with other territory both sides claim. More important is how Washington deals with the Kurdish issue in the future in both Iraq and Syria. Kurdish fighters have been crucial U.S. allies against the Islamic State group, yet the signals from Washington indicate small interest in the Kurds' fate once their fighters are no longer needed. Ms. Rubin's world outlook is governed governs the way she formulates her viewpoint. She clearly suggests that the U.S. would be an honest broker in any dialogue between the Kurds and the Iraqi government. That's outrageous. Malcolm X once remarked, "You don't take your case to the criminal. No, you take your criminal to court." But one fact is irrefutable. The Kurdish people have been betrayed. Intentionally, unintentionally, that's irrelevant. The damage has been done. This, my friends, is a defining moment in more ways than one, considering the fact that some forces want to align themselves with a lunatic regime in the White House. The leadership in the White House is unpredictable, with a racist, fascist, sexist, maniacal, warmongering idiot at the titular head of it all. Trump just recently retweeted a post from Britain First, a right-wing fascist cesspool. Tell me, what's going on in Trump's mind? What's his message? It's disgusting. Beware. Every day they're rattling their saber. The enemy of my enemy is my friend is a convoluted argument. There's very little discussion going on between the anti-war peace movement and the political organizations fighting for their rights to be recognized as a people with a homeland. How will all of these struggles coincide with the spirit of the anti-war peace movement? We are being pitted against each other. But we are sounding an alarm. The Stop the War Brigade is. And we're calling for soldiers to refuse, resist, and rebel inside these imperialist armies. The anti-war movement is actively opposing war plans of the U.S.-NATO alliance, who cynically proclaim them to be the world, that they are trustworthy and responsible allies of certain liberation struggles. Those forces are fighting for self-determination, a noble cause, but not in their allies' plans. Who would deny them the right to live in peace without fear of war, persecution, exploitation, and having the right to decide their just future? However, the U.S. NATO allies are the very people who put them in that situation in the first place. That's a paradox. People can come up with rationalizations to support dancing with the devil, and that's the title of my speech, but these arguments are just not convincing. You pay the devil now, or you pay him later. That's your only option when you deal with them. The bill is invariably paid with someone's blood. Those are the dangers and pitfalls in such an arrangement. You're locked in a death dance with no sense of what the future holds. One thing I'd like to mention before I finish, I'm wearing this tunic, this shirt here. This is the tunic of a deserting U.S. soldier. We have upwards of 60,000 soldiers who have deserted, so you keep that in mind. Hip-hop has played a major role in culture worldwide. Many artists, it is a platform to expose the ills of society, to offer solutions, to inspire, to enlighten, to criticize, to reflect, and to call to action. I'll leave you with an excerpt from a rap song from Immortal Technique. So when the devil wants to dance with you, you'd better say never, because a dance with the devil might last forever. Thank you.
Much thanks, Darnell, for that. Our last speaker this morning is Professor Michael Gunter. Michael is Professor of Political Science at Tennessee Technological University in Cookeville, Tennessee. He also serves as the Secretary General of the EU-Turkey Civic Commission, the EU-TCC, headquartered in Brussels. Michael's taught courses for many years at the International University in Vienna, also courses on Kurdish and Middle Eastern politics for U.S. Government Area Studies Program and U.S. Department of State Foreign Service Institute. Michael's the author of 10 critically acclaimed books on the Kurdish question and editor or co-editor of 4 others. He's a regular publisher of scholarly articles on the Kurds and on many other issues. I believe he has 3 books coming out on the Kurdish issue just later this year, which is an impressive achievement in itself. And Michael will talk about the role and policies of the European institutions, political and legal challenges. Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you hear me? Is this thing on? Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to be back here where people speaks so many different languages. It reminds me the definition of multilingualism. A multilingual person is somebody who speaks many different languages. So a bilingual person is somebody who speaks 2 languages. Do you know what a monolingual person is called? An American. So, that,
2 languages.
Okay, thank you. U.S. President Donald J. Trump declared during his presidential campaign in 2016, "I'm a big fan of the Kurdish forces. At the same time, I think we have a potentially very successful relations with Turkey. And it would be really wonderful if we could put them somehow both together. The U.S. working with the Kurds in Syria was very smart, but only tactically in the short run. Strategically, in the long run, it alienated Turkey, the much more important U.S. NATO ally. Thus, as Trump observed, the U.S. needed a new strategy to bring Turkey and the Kurds together. But this was like squaring the circle, as the PYD, YPG in Syria was a PKK friend. The U.S. looked hypocritical, claiming that the SDF was not the YPG, since the SDF largely was the YPG. Of course, Turkey too looked hypocritical, given its earlier support for ISIS. So, what can the U.S., the EU, Turkey, and the Kurds do to try to square the circle and bring Turkey and the PKK, PYD Kurds together? The Oslo talks between Turkey and the PKK from 2008 until May 2011, along with the on-again, off-again Kurdish opening between 2009 and 2011, and then the ceasefire from 2013 until July 2015, although ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrate that it is not impossible to bring the two sides together. Indeed, during the Turkish PKK ceasefire, the mainline U.S. weekly magazine Time, in its issue of April-May 2013, named the previously obscure Öcalan as one of the, quote, 100 most influential people in the world, and called him, quote, a voice for peace. Previously, such praise would have been completely inconceivable in the United States. To further this peace project, the EU and the U.S. should delist the PKK as a terrorist group. That means take it off the terrorist list, and encourage Turkey to do so too. After all, the EU and U.S. largely list the PKK as a terrorist organization to please Turkey. Once the EU and U.S. realize how this prevents peace, they will have an incentive to delist the PKK and encourage Turkey to do so for its own good, to renew the peace process. After all, one does not normally negotiate with terrorists or expect to do so seriously by calling the other side such names. Too often the term terrorist is used mainly for political reasons, to brand one's opponent as illegitimate, and so it is largely in this case. For example, for more than a quarter of a century, the United States so branded Nelson Mandela and his African National Congress. Indeed, although the U.S. lists the PKK as a terrorist organization, the U.S. still has supported the PKK's friend, the PYD, YPG, against ISIS in Syria, And the U.S. even worked with the PKK in the Singal region in Iraq against ISIS to save the Yazidis in the summer of 2014. In the past, the U.S. has also listed Fidel Castro's Cuba, the Mujahideen al-Khalq, and even I find this amazing, but officially the KRG's Barzani and Talabani were listed as terrorists for narrow political reasons, specifically because they had opposed the government of Saddam Hussein when he was sovereign in Iraq. Anyway, it's clear this political nature of the usage of the term terrorists. Delisting the PKK will encourage both Turkey and the PKK to renew peace negotiations, which, if successful, would alleviate one of Turkey's long-standing security, political, economic, social problems. Once the PKK is delisted, both Turkey and the PKK will be challenged, this time to take up the mantle of negotiations more seriously and responsibly. However, if it does not work, the PKK can always be relisted. What went wrong with the earlier ceasefire? When the HDP won 13% of the vote for the Turkish parliament in the elections of 7 June 2015, it helped deny Erdogan's AKP a renewed ruling majority. Erdogan successfully calculated, in the short run at least, that he could regain his majority by turning on the Kurds and appealing to the Turkish ultranationalists. However, the HDP leader, Selahattin Demirtas, is also to blame for what happened because he needlessly provoked Erdogan by declaring that the HDP would not allow Erdogan to become a constitutionally executive strong president as Erdogan wanted to. And even said, I repeat this 3 times, we will not allow you to become president, reminiscent of the traditional Islamic way that the man dismisses the wife in a divorce. In retrospect, let's be honest, we make mistakes too. In retrospect, it might have been better for the HDP leader not to have said this, but instead try to work with Erdogan as he was consolidating his power. Instead, Erdogan perceived Demirtas's declaration as a threat, and this contributed to his turning on the HDP and eventually imprisoning Demirtas and other HDP leaders, as well as renewing the war against the PKK. Delisting the PKK might also encourage Turkey not to view Rojava, Northern Syrian Federation now, and the PYD-YPG with such hostility. Because once Turkish PKK peace negotiations begin again, Turkey would also be prone to deal more peacefully with the PKK's friend, PYD-YPG. This would also help lessen the U.S.-Turkish quarrel over the U.S. support for the PYD-YPG. Even more, for the Kurds, this would pay dividends because once ISIS is defeated, an event about to happen and be completed, as we know, in Syria, the U.S. is likely to drop its support for Rojava, an event that we know is happening now. And so in the long run, Rojava and the PYD need an understanding with Turkey because the U.S. is not always going to be there to help. The analogy with what just happened to the KRG should be obvious. As already mentioned, the U.S. has worked with the PKK, FRED, PYD, YPG very successfully in Syria, and even the PKK itself to help save the Yazidis in Iraq's Shingal region, despite the U.S. officially branding the PKK as terrorists. Therefore, delisting the PKK would help renew the peace process, the negotiations between Turkey and the PKK, brighten Rojava's long-term prospects, and help end the NATO crisis between the U.S. and Turkey. Delisting the PKK would be a bold, imaginative move by the EU and U.S. that would contribute to Turkish-Kurdish peace process. Jonathan, am I out of time, or do I have another few minutes? Okay. Thank you, sir. Jonathan said nice things about my publications and everything, so I'll say something much more true. Here, Jonathan is not only a scholar, but he's a practitioner. I find reading his reports from the actual field to be most informative, and I commend him on them. Okay, how might these new Turkish PKK negotiations proceed? Well, Turkish territorial integrity must be maintained. Some Turkish state decentralization is in order to satisfy the Kurds' legitimate right to local self-government, or what the PKK terms democratic autonomy. The Kurds should be recognized as a people with all legitimate rights. This should be written in the Turkish constitution. Indeed, over-centralization of the state is a bane that many other modern states have sought to adjust. Most large states have decentralized today to achieve greater efficiency. The U.S., UK, Germany, even France and Spain, despite the current crisis involving Catalonia, have effectively decentralized over the years and recently. Such provisions for the Kurds will not destroy Turkey, but actually make Turkey stronger by strengthening the loyalty of its ethnic Kurdish population, the majority of which already lives west of Ankara, Istanbul being the largest Kurdish city in the world. Most ethnic Kurds in Turkey do not desire to secede from Turkey. The United States, European Union, United Nations, NATO, and the KRG should eventually be brought in as witnesses and guarantors of these new Turkish constitutional principles. However, Turkey presently does not want to acknowledge collective rights for its ethnic Kurds and is willing to grant merely limited individual rights such as mother tongue language in the schools and a Kurdish TV channel, one for children. In addition, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission should be established, as was done in South Africa. The present cessation of hostilities, the fate of PKK fighters, and provisions for post-conflict security, among others, should also be considered. On the other hand, U.S. support to Turkey in an attempt to assassinate PKK leader Jamal Bayik, an idea floated in the summer of 2017, is not a good idea. Historically, the PKK has used little violence against third parties. This would surely end if the U.S. helped kill Bayik. In closing, I note that currently the U.S. State Department has supported Turkey to keep its NATO ally in the alliance. As James F. Jeffrey, the former U.S. ambassador to Turkey and Iraq, has said, We are just bred on the importance of Turkey. And we must realize that when we consider these problems. However, as President Trump has also said, we should bring Turkey and the Kurds together. As difficult as this will be, I have suggested some ways to get started. And the number one way is by delisting the PKK. Thank you.
So thanks very much to Michael. Thanks to all the speakers for their contributions and also for being good on time management, which has left us a good period of time, 3/4 of an hour, a little bit more even for discussion. So we'll get to the question and answer session now, and I'll hand over to my colleague Takis Hadjigeorglou to manage that part. Thanks.
Well, I thank also the speakers. And trying to wind up the discussion, I may try to ask the first question, and I'll see if the speakers can, one of them answer or some of them answer to that. And then everyone here can go on by asking her own question. People around Kurdish issue, I mean people who are not very good related to the problems of the issue, they think, and they are maybe a bit naive, they think that the Kurds has to initiate a new movement as Kurds from Turkey, from Iran, from Iraq, from Syria, a new movement towards one state. Because now we all of us know that the Kurds are very, very divided people. The Kurds from Iraq have different views on their future than the Kurds in Turkey, and the Kurds in Iran a different view for their future than the Kurds in Syria. Is there any possibility for this new movement, which will, in my view, create the atmosphere and the spirit needed to combine forces in order to see a better future for all of them? That's the first question. And the second one is, do you think that in the United States there are think tanks who believe in the division of Turkey towards the idea of creating a new state for Kurds within Turkey or without Turkey or outside of Turkey, to put it in a better way? And I think sometimes that the Americans, and I mean here the American government, and not only the one which is now on the power, but also the previous one, I think that they don't work on the idea of dividing Turkey, but I believe, though, that they will welcome such a development. So please, if someone can deliver on that very extreme ideas, maybe, and to give us a new element on the discussion. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I fully, completely understood that question, but the idea of think tanks in the U.S. is a huge country, and we have, as you just heard in this panel, a variety of different opinions from Americans. So maybe there are think tanks that want to divide Turkey, but the mainline think tanks that I've dealt with in Washington, and there are many of them, I think in recently would say two things. One, that I've seen nothing about dividing Turkey. The problem that the think tanks have in Washington would be that as we heard from David Phillips yesterday, there's a deep feeling of betrayal in the United States on the part of Turkey's support for ISIS in earlier years. And one thing that Mr. Phillips did not mention that has deeply disturbed American military and political authorities, the Turks have recently revealed, printed in Sabah, one of the few remaining newspapers in Turkey, locations of American supposedly secret military installations in northern Syria, and opening these installations up to being attacked by enemies, and even getting Americans killed. And U.S. people will say, well, what kind of ally is that? And, of course, also, if Turkey is a member of NATO, what kind of ally in NATO is buying its military equipment from Russia when all the NATO equipment is supposed to be integrated among the NATO allies? So what I have seen among think tanks in the United States is a deep disappointment at the best, and even hatred of what Turkey has done. And there's even some talk of kicking Turkey out of NATO. I'm not quite sure how that would be done. I don't think NATO actually has a procedure for delisting a member of NATO. But anyway, that's my impressions. Thank you.
So I'm not an expert on the state of opinion inside of United States think tanks, but I do think that there is concern about the future of Turkey that you've heard expressed yesterday by people closer to the foreign policy establishment than myself. And I think that this goes back ultimately to the decision in what was in 2002 by Erdogan that the United States could not use Turkish bases for the illegal criminal invasion of Iraq. So I do think that some of the concerns about Turkey are linked to those sorts of questions, which I think it's important to not overlook, just because of the fact that the Kurdish freedom movement is so brutally pummeled by Turkey. Not all of the reasons why the United States is opposed to Turkey are legitimate or just ones. So, but with respect to the question of a united Kurdistan, I think here we're here talking about the alternative to tyranny and chaos in the Middle East. And I think it's really important to stress a few things about Abdullah Öcalan's vision of what Kurdish self-determination can mean in the 21st century along the lines of a democratic confederal model. I think Öcalan will go down in history as making a very important contribution to rethinking and reformulating what self-determination can mean in the 21st century. Precisely because the Kurdish, so why the Kurds? Why are the Kurds at the center of so much of this discussion? So much, why are they on the receiving end of so much state violence? Has to do with them being, situated across these, in many ways, historically illegitimate borders that were drawn by the imperialist powers at the end of the First World War. And Öcalan came to the conclusion that the dream of a greater Kurdistan and the dream of a greater Kurdish nation state was in fact just an inflection, so to speak, of the same kind of nation state mentality that the Kurds had been suffering so much for. And so he's re-articulated what self-determination means, so that it's not about changing borders, and it's not about trying to get a nation state for the Kurds, but it's about radical democracy against the state, radically democratizing the state, and we move towards something like a confederation of peoples in the Middle East, governing themselves democratically, rather than thinking of it as all of the different ethnic peoples need to create a state of their own, and then repeat on a smaller level the same kinds of atrocities against the different minorities amongst them. So I think that re-articulation of self-determination in a way that moves it away from the goal of a greater Kurdistan, I think is a very important contribution that other people have mentioned. And I think it's an important issue that a lot of people don't understand this. As you see, one of the things that I quoted, the Human Rights Commissioner talking about the separatist forces in Turkey. And it's very important to understand that the Kurdish freedom movement for over a decade now has, not just for tactical reasons, but for reasons that have been very well articulated and explained as a matter of principle, rescinded this idea of a greater Kurdish nation state as the goal or what it means to achieve self-determination.
سەبارەت بە پرسیاری یەکەم کە ئایا دەکرێت لەناو کوردانی یەکێتی بهێنرێتەکایەوە لە ڕاستیە بەڵێ من پێم وایە کە ئەمە کرێ بەڵام ئەمە تەنها بە قسەکردن ناکرێت پێویستە پارتە کوردیەکان چ لە باشوور چ لە ڕۆژهەوا لە ڕۆژهەڵات لە باکوور ئەوە لەبەرچاو بگرن کە پێویستە دان بە جیاوازەکانی یەکترا بنێن بوونی جیاوازی و تەنانەت بوونی ململانێ لە نێوان خاوەن بیر و ڕاجیاوازەکان شتێکی ئاساییە ئێوە لە ئەوروپا لە ڕێگای سیستمێکی دموکراسی لە ڕێگای دامەزراوەکانەوە جیاوازیەکانی خۆتانتان کردووە بە سەرچاوەی هێز و توانی وتانە هێزێکی گەورە لەسەر ئاستی نێودەوڵەتی دروست بکەن بە هەمان شێوە کوردانی دەتوانن ئەگەر دان بە جیاوازەکانی یەکترا بنێن و ئەگەر دامەزراوەی ئەو توان هەبێ کە هەمووان تیا جێبگرن ئەتوانن هێزێکی گەورەتر دروست بکەن لە ماوەی شەڕی داعش پێکەوە کارکردنی کوردان لە شەڕی دژی گروپی تێرۆریستی داعش چ پێشمەرگە لە باشوور و ڕۆژهەڵات چ شەڕوانانی ڕۆژاوە چ گەریلای باکوور هەموو پێکەوە کاریان دژ بە گروپی تێرۆریستی داعش کرد و سەرکەوتنی ئێجگار گەوریان بەدەستیانە وتوانیان ڕوبەڕووی ئەم گروپە تێرۆریستیە درڕندەیە ببنەوە لە سەنگەرەکانی پێشەوەی ڕوبەڕووبوونەوەی تێرۆر پێویستە ئەم نمونەیە لە کارکردنی پێکەوە دژ بە تێرۆریستان بگوازینەوە بۆ نمونەیەکی سیاسی بۆ کارکردنی سیاسیش و هێزە کوردیەکان بتوانن بەو شێوەیە بەردەوام بن لە دۆزینەوەی ئامانجی هاوبەش و کارکردن بۆ دۆزینەوەی بەرژەوەندی هاوبەش و کارکردنی هاوبەش لە بواری سیاسیش هەڵبەت مەسەلەی بێلایەنکردنی هێزە چەکدارەکان و بەکارهێنانی هێزی چەکدار لە ململانی سیاسی نێوان پارتە کوردیەکانیش ئەمەش خۆی بۆ خۆی مەسەلەیەکی ئەجگار گرنگە چ لە باشوور و لە نێوان هێزەکانی باشووری کوردستان چ لە پەیوەندی نێوان پارچەکانی کوردستان چونکە هەندێک جار هێزی چەکدار لە نێوان هێزە سیاسی جیاوازەکانی پارچەکانیش بەکار هاتووە بە پرۆفیشناڵکردنی هەرچی زیاتری هێزە چەکدارەکان لەو ناوچەیە خزمەت بە هێنانەکانی استراتیژێکی هاوبەش و کارکردنی هاوبەشدات لەو بوارەیە
Before you begin, can I just suggest if you have a question to a specific speaker, direct it to them, then we can get as many speakers in as possible.
Yes, my question is for Mr. Sadiq. It's about the referendum outcome. The local differences were rather big in several parts, like it was more than 90% yes, and other parts like around 80 maybe. I was wondering if you can reflect on many people voted not yes because of protest against the whole procedure and against KDP. I was wondering if there's also people who didn't vote yes or who voted no because they are against the nation state as such and they don't want that for Bashir.
سەبارەت بە ڕێفراندۆم بەڕاستی ئامادەکاری پێویست بۆ ئەنجامدانی ڕێفراندۆم لە باشووری کوردستان نەهات بۆ ئەنجامدان چ لە ڕووی سیاسی چ لە ڕووی سەربازی چ لە ڕووی ئەمنی چ لە ڕووی ئابووری و چ لە ڕووی دیپلۆماسیشەوە لەم پرۆسە گرنگە بەڕاستی نەک تەنها ئەوەی یەکێتیی ناوخۆیی چێنەکرا بەڵکو ئەم پرۆسەیە وای لێکرا کە یەکێتی ناوخۆیی کوردانی ئەوەندەی تر تووشی کێشە کرد لە پرۆسەیەکی وەها گرنگە کە باسکردن بوو لە چارەنووسی خەڵکی کوردستان پەرلەمانی کوردستان پەرلایز کرا کە پەرلەمانی کوردستان بە پێی یاسا کارپێکراوەکانی هەرێم مەرجعی باڵای بڕیاردانی سیاسیە لە هەرێمی کوردستان لە ناو ناخی هەموو کوردێک نەتەنها لە باشووری کوردستان بەڵکو من دڵنیام لە هەموو پارچەکانی کوردستان و تەنانەت لە دیاسپۆراش بوونی دەوڵەتێکی کوردی عقدەیەکی گەورەیە کاتێک کە کورد ئەبینێت هەموو دەوڵەتەکانی هەموو نەتەوەکانی دراوسەی خاوەنی دەوڵەتن و خاوەنی ئاڵای خۆیانن نەک ئەوە زۆربەی هەرە زۆری نەتەوەکانی جیهان خاوەنی دەوڵەتن بەڵام کورد دەوڵەتی نییە ئەمە عقدەیەکی زۆر گەورەیە لە ناخی هەموو کوردێکە بەڵام خەڵکی باشووری کوردستان لەوەیان ڕوانی کە جیاواز بوون لەوەی لە بیرکردنەوە لەوەی ئایا ئەو کاتی دروستکردنی دەوڵەتی کوردی بوو پرسیارێکی گەورە هەبوو کە ئایا ئەسڵەن ئەنجامدانی ڕفراندۆم بۆ دروستکردنی دەوڵەتی سربەخۆی کوردستانە یان بۆ یەکلاکردنەوەی هەندێک ململانی سیاسیە لە ناوخۆی کوردستان یان بۆ شاردنەوەی هەندێک کەم و کوڕی و کەم کێماسی بوو کە لە باشووری کوردستانە هەبوو لە ئەنجامی ئەمە بیرۆڕا جیاواز بوون بە سەبارەت بە ڕێفراندۆم ئەم پرسە گرنگە کە پرسێکی نیشتیمانی و نەتەوەیی بوو نەیتوانی کۆمام کاتەوە یعنی هاوڵاتیەک لە سلێمانیان لە هەولێر سێری ئەوەیە کرد کە حکوومەتێک نەتوانێ موچەی موچەخۆرەکانی خۆی مانگانە دابین کە وەڕوعە موچە بە خەڵکەدات ئایا چۆن نەتوانێ دوای ئەنجامدانی ڕفراندۆم دەوڵەت دروست بکات کە لە کاتێکە هیچ ژێرخانێکی ئابووری بوونی نییە هەڵبەت تەنها ئەمە کێشەکە نەبوو بەڵکو زۆرێک لە دۆستەکانمان عەرزی گەورەیان خستە بەردەم هەرێمی کوردستان بۆ چارەسەرکردنی کێشەکانی لەگەڵ عێراق بەداخەوە دیسانەوە ئەو عەرزانش لە بەرچاو نەگیران و بەبێ ڕەچاوکردنی بەرپرسیارەتی ڕفراندۆم لە دۆخێکی ئێجگار ئاڵۆزە ئەنجام درا و بەڕاستی دەرەنجامەکەشی زۆر کارە ساتبار بەسەر خەڵکی کوردستان ئەشکایەوە دۆخی کوردی لە باشووری کوردستان نەک نەبردە پێشەوە بەڵکو ئەتوانم بڵێم کە گەڕاندینیەوە بۆ نەوەدەکانی سەدەی ڕابردوو و بەشێکی زۆر لەو دەستکەوتانەی لە دوای ڕوخانی ڕژەمی پێشووی عێراق و لە شەڕی دژ بە گروپی تەرۆریستی داعش بەدەست هاتبوون بەداخەوە ئەو دەستکەوتانی لەبار برد.
The referendum, to me, is somewhat troubling. What I think is misunderstanding here. This was not a referendum on declaring independence. It was a sort of a voice of the people recommending that the KRG government pursue negotiations with Baghdad. It was not an out-and-out declaration of independence. Now, the KRG, the Kurds have been without a state for over 100 years after the modern creation of the state system after World War I in the Middle East. Barzani has specifically said for the last 4 years that he was thinking about calling a referendum. Frankly, I think that if Baghdad had not had the excuse of the referendum, Baghdad would have found another reason to intervene. Now, it is true that the referendum turned out to be a disaster, but how are the Kurds ever going to become independent? So many people say, when will you give us our independence? Well, I'll tell you, nobody's going to give you your independence. You're going to take your independence. And to some extent, I made a mistake here too, I admit it. But I thought maybe the time was right to move toward independence now. It turned out the time was not right, and Barzani made some crucial mistakes. But these were mistakes of the heart, and these were mistakes of omission. It was not a mistake that was an error of commission where he should not have thought of the dirty idea of independence. independence is for the Kurds, and they deserve it, and they are going to get it. It's a temporary setback, but Kurds always climb out of the hole and come back again to please us.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Actually, I have two questions. Both of them are very important. I come from east part of Kurdistan, which is more or less is forgotten in these deliberations today. But my first question is to Professor Michael Gunter. You mentioned regarding the delisting of PKK, you mentioned the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. Mujahideen-e-Khalq is an Iranian organization who in the past they have directly attacked the interests of USA. Even some US military personnel in Iran were killed, and the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, they were accused for responsibility in these acts. But in spite of all of that, because of the lobbying in the United States, they have been delisted from the terror lists. So what is your suggestion? What particularly people who are really suffering from this so-called terrorist stamp, what concretely they can do in order that this process to be somehow initiated? Because we know that practically on the other side of the border, so American, actual policies helps the friends of PKK. Second question is to the Speaker of the Kurdistan region parliament in the south, and the question is about the concept of political responsibility. You, Professor Gunter, said that the result of the referendum was a disaster, but among the leadership in south of Kurdistan, we don't see any question of responsibility. Nobody takes responsibility for this disaster. Is Masoud Barzani a responsible person or not? So that was my expectation, that you had to mention this in this parliament. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, as the chair here, can you clarify the question to me? I didn't quite understand. Did you understand it better? Hussein, you speak excellent English. I know that. Could you clarify so I don't just...
My question to you is that you want to PKK to be delisted.
Yes.
So I gave a comparison with an organization who was in the list of terrorists in America, but it was delisted. Mujahideen, which directly had done things directly against the interests of Americans, whereas PKK has never, for instance, been involved in kind of assassination or something against the American personnel, nowhere. On the other hand, we have this problem, this so-called duplicity, and on the other side of the border, they are supporting the friends of PKK, according to your own description. So how it can be processed, how you can work in the United States in order the United States delist PKK. Because if the United States does that, so the European Union does it the day after. Thank you. I think it was very clear English, yes?
Okay, thank you. And again, remember, I'm an American. I'm monolingual. Thank you for your question. And I think on this issue of delisting terrorist organizations, it should be a one-by-one process. And in the case of, I'm not qualified really to talk about the Mujahideen's terrorism being on the list, but I do think my point was valid. The United States has used this terrorism list again and again for narrow political reasons rather than legitimate reasons. And we heard it today. One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. There is no definition of terrorism. It is simply a political propaganda term many times, not always. I think ISIS, we can agree, was a legitimate terrorist movement. But many times this term terrorism is a narrow political term used for political propagandistic reasons. And largely I think that's so for the PKK. And I simply suggested that if we want to seriously start up peace negotiations again, one step would be to take the PKK off the terrorism list, and I think the United States should take the lead, because if the United States takes PKK off the terrorist list, then Turkey will be encouraged to do so too. If we wait for Turkey to do it first, we'll wait forever.
Yes, my question is...
سبارت بە پرسیاری دومی بەڕێزت کاک حەسەن لە ڕاستیە بارزانی بەرپرسیار بوو لەو دۆخە بەڵام بەتەنیا ئەو بەرپرسیار نەبوو هەموو ئەو سەرکردە حیزبیانی لە دەرەوەی دامەزراوە شەرعیەکانی هەرێمی کوردستان لیژنەیەکیان دروست کرد و پەرلەمانی کوردستانیان پەرەڵایز کرد و لەو لیژنە حیزبیە کە ناوی ئەنجومەنی باڵای ڕفراندۆم بوو بڕیاریان لەسەر ئەنجامدانی ڕفراندۆمدا هەمویان بەڕاستی بەرپرسیارن دوجار بەڕێز بارزانی بەرپرسیارەتی هەڵگرت و وازی لە سەرۆکایەتیە ناقانونیەکەی خۆی هێنا بەڵام من پێم وایە کە ئەوە تەنها کافی نییە بەڵکو ئەو سیستمەش کە لە هەرێمی کوردستان هەیە کە سیستمێکی نادیموکراسی تا ڕادەیەکی زۆر و سیستمێکە حزبەکان باڵادەستی یەکەمن تایە و نوێنەرایەتی خەڵک ڕۆڵێکی گەورە نابینێتایە و ئابوووریەکی شەفاف نییە و هێزە چەکدارەکان بە تەواوەتی بێلایەن نەکراون ئەو سیستمەش بەرپرسیارەوە وای کردووە ئێمە ئامادە نەبین چ لە ڕووی سیاسی ئامادە نەبین دامەزراوەکانمان سەرپێ نەکەوتون چ لە ڕووی ئابووریەوە ئامادە نەبین داهاتی وڵاتەکەی ئێمە چێتە گیرفانی دەستەبژێرێکی کەمەوە لە بڕیەوەی کە لە قازانجی بەرژەوەندی گشتیە و لە قازانجی ژێرخانی ئابووری و بنیاتنانی ژێرخانێکی ئابووری بەهێزەوە بەکاربهێنرێ ئەوەش هەموو بەرپرسیارەوە ئێمە پێویستمان بە سیستمێکی حکومڕانی نوێ هەیە لە باشووری کوردستان کە ئاڵوگۆڕی ئاشتیانەی دەسەڵات تیابێتەکایەوە کە ئابووریەکی شەفاف تیابێتەکایەوە دەسەڵاتێکی دادوەری چالاک لە هەرێمی کوردستان هەبێت و لە هەمان کاتە حکوومەتێکمان هەبێت بەرپرسیار بێ بەرامبەر بە دەسەڵاتی یاسادانان نەک حکوومەتێکمان هەبێت کە هەر کاتێک بەدڵی نەبوو پەرلەمان دابخات بۆیە هەموو ئەمانە بەرپرسیارن و پێویستە کات بەڕوانینێکی تازەوە لە حکومڕانێکی تازە لە هەرێمی کوردستان بڕوانێ
سوالی من پرسیاری من بۆ بەڕێز یوسف محەممەد سەدیق دەرابطە دەگەڵ یەکڕێزی و یەکسانی دوای لەسەر و قەزیە دوای کەوتی ئەگەر بە یەکڕێزی و بە یەکسانی بچینە پێشەوە من پێم وایە یعنی مێژووی کوردەوەی ثابت کردووە کامە یەکڕێزی و یەکسانیمان هەیە بۆ دەشەری تێروریستە عەلەیهی تێروریست بۆی کە بۆ داعش بچینە پێشێ هەموو یەکڕێزین هەموو یەکسانین هەتا ئێستا یەک تەقینەوە لە کوردستان ڕووی نەداوە هیچ نوع ئامالێکی تێروریستی لە خودی کوردستانیدا ڕووی نەداوە ئایا بەڕاستی ئەوە سوالی من ئەوەیە کە هەر ئەوە گەو برادەرەمان فەرمووی ئەمە we are dancing with the devil لەو لاشەوە هەر وەک پرۆفسۆر مایکل ئشارەی پێکرد کە بۆچی ئەمریکا سەپۆرتی سەلاحەدین دەمەرتاژ یەپەوێ و ئەوانە دەکا وەلی لەو لاوە پێکەکەی دەکتێت we are dancing with the devil ئایا بەڕاستی کاتی ئەوەی نەهاتوە کامە چاو بکەینەوە بۆ خۆمان پاڵسی میکەر بین چیدی کە چاوەڕوانی کەسی دیکە نەبین کە پاڵسی میکەر بێ بۆمە بۆ وڵاتەکەمان گەلێک سپاس
زۆر سپاس بۆ تۆ بەتەواوی هاوڕام لەگەڵ تۆ ئێمە نەتەوەیەکین ئەتوانین لەسەر پێی خۆمان ڕاوەستین توانای بەشەری و توانای مادی ئێجگار گەورە لەسەر زەمینەکەمان هەیە نەک هەر ئەوە بەڵکو ئەتوانم بە تەواوی متمانەوە بڵێم ئێمە میراتگیری شارستانێتە دێرینەکانی ناوچەکەی خۆشمانین بەڵام ئەوەی کە کێشەیە ئەمڕۆ لە باشووری کوردستان ئەوەیە کە ئێمە نەمانتوانیوە سیستمێکی حکومڕانی پێشکەوتووی سەردەمیانە دروست بکەین و لە پارچەکانی تریش بەداخەوە ئەو دەوڵەتانی کە کوردی بەسرا دابەش بووە هەم کوردە چەوسێننەوە هەم سیستمێکی دموکرات نین لە ڕۆژاوە بەرەو پێشوون هەیە کە جێگەی خۆشحاڵیە بۆیە بنیاتنانی سیستمێکی حکومڕانی پێشکەوتووی سەردەمیانە کە بگونجێ لەگەڵ توانە بەشەری و مادیەکانی کوردستان ڕێگا خۆشەکە بۆ ئەوەی کە ئێمە خۆمان بڕیار بدەین ئەزانی من وەکو باسم کرد بوونی جیاوازی کێشە نییە لەناو هەموو دەوڵەتانی پێشکەوتوش جیاوازی هەیە ئەوەی کە کێشەیە چۆنیەتی چارەسەرکردنی جیاوازیەکانە چۆنیەتی پێگەیشتنە لە خاڵە مامناوەندەکان و چۆنیەتی ئاڵوگۆڕکردنی ئاشتیانەی دەسەڵاتە ئەمە واکات بەهێز و بەهێزتربی سیستمی دموکراسی هەمیشە نوێبوونەوە هێنێتەکایەوە نەک 4 ساڵ جارێک بەڵکو جاری وایە 2 ساڵ جارێک نوێبوونەوە هێنێتەکایەوە و لەنجامی ئەم نوێبوونەوانە هەمیشە کەم و کورتیەکان چارەسەرەکرێن و هەوڵی پێشخست نەدرێت بۆیە لەوەمان کەمە وەگەرنا لە ڕووی توانای بەشەری توانای مادی و مێژوو و پاشخانی شارستانیش هیچ کێشەیەکمان نییە و گەلی ئێمە هاوشێوەی گەلانی ترە توانێ ژیانێکی شایستەی هەبێت.
This issue of I'm going to invite you to come in. I want to say this issue is very important, and therefore I was going to use the prerogative of the chair to invite any of the other speakers who'd like to answer this question too. So if Darnell would like to, please go ahead.
Well, I'd like to comment on a statement that Professor Gunter made. There certainly is a definition for terrorism, and the way I interpreted your statement, it was like a back door out for the United States. Because I'm assuming that you would not designate the United States as a terrorist organization. As I said, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and certainly what went on in Vietnam, and I'll talk specifically about that, was a state of terrorism in every regard. I, along with many millions of other Vietnam veterans, are applying for compensation for being contaminated with Agent Orange. Not only did they spray it as a defoliant to ostensibly reveal the supply routes of the so-called enemy, they also sprayed it on us without our knowledge. And I'll just read the definition in the, but I know, the use of violence and threats to intimidate or coerce, especially for political purposes. There is a working definition of terrorism. No one can say we don't have a definition for terrorism or we cannot define it. I mean, it's in our colloquial speech, it's in the dictionaries, it's in articles, it's everywhere. And what the war on terror, what are we talking about? So the United States, and we say it, you may disagree or agree, it is the biggest terrorist organization on this planet, in the history of this planet, with all of its crimes, since its inception. Slavery is terrorism, genocide is terrorism, war is terrorism, exploitation. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We're not going to let them go out the back door, because that seems to be the underlying concept of your statement. All right? And I wish you would clarify that, please.
Well, very briefly, this is a conference on the Kurds, not the United States and the Vietnam War. So I will have to not go into that. I think that recently the Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War, which I don't know how much you've seen that in Europe, but it's excellent. It shows both sides to the issue. And there is no doubt that my country has committed many sins in the past. But when you look at the overall history of the United States over the 200 years of its existence, I don't think there's any better force for humanity, human rights, and decency in this world than the United States, and I'm not going to back off of that statement.
I would like to move on to more questions. Who else has a question? Yes, please.
از دخوازم برس محمد صادق بپرسم و بس کر بشتی رفراندوم براسی آلوزیه که مزن لباشری کردستانی بردوام دکه yani ev وهاتن خاندنی وجی aynı zaman اللي بلی ایروشون دا هنی گاوک چاباویجین yani hem ber vi alozil ve krizi hezin başşuri Kürdistan PDK yani ki Goran hezindeni çi fikrin planak proje heye mesela kongre tava Kürdistan debek ve çareseri hildin dest müjareke ustada axaftını ve an plan proje ve hene
لراستيا اويك ريفراندوم هناك كايوا رك اوبوك ايمش توشي شكستي قناغك بوين توشي شكستي جورك للسيستم الحكمراني بوين ك خصين يا بردم يوي كبيويستا شوازي كي تل حكمراني لباشوري كردستان بيننا كايوا ولنا وكردستان بهز كينوا اوي واي كرد هرمي كردستان لبردم پەلامارەکان و هێرشە سەربازیەکانی عێراق خۆی ڕانەگرێ جیاوازیە ناو خۆیەکان لاوازی سیاسی بوو نەک لاوازی هێزی پێشمەرگە ئەو هێزەی کە بە درێژایی 3 ساڵی ڕابردوو زۆر قارەمانانە دژ بە گروپی تێرۆریستی داعش جەنگە بۆیە چاکردنی بارودۆخی ناوخۆیی هەرێمی کوردستان چ لە ڕووی سیاسی چ لە ڕووی ئابووری و چ لە ڕووی ئەمنی و سەربازیەوە ڕێگا خۆشەکە بۆەوەی کوردستان لە ناوەوە بەهێز بێ بەرامبەر بە کارکتەرەکانی دەرەوە کە ئەوانیش دیسانەوە یانەی کاریگەریان لەسەر باشووری کوردستان هەبێت و هاوتەریب لەگەڵ ئەمە باشووری کوردستان و هێزە سیاسیەکانی باشووری کوردستان ئەگەر بیانەوێت لە دەرەوە بەهێز بن دیسانەوە پێویستی بە دروستکردنی شێوەیەک لە لێک تێگەیشتنی کوردانە هەیە لەگەڵ کوردی پارچەکانی تری کوردستان چ ڕۆژاوا چ ڕۆژهەڵات چ باکوور ئەمەش ئێستا هەنگاوی باش لەم ڕۆوە هاتوونەتە کایەوە چەند کۆنفرانسێک بەستراون چ لە باشوور چ لە دیاسپۆرا چ لە پارچەکانی تر کە پێویستە گەشەی پێ بدرێ و پێویستە ئەمە وردە وردە بگەێنرێتە ئاستی یەکێتی نەتەوەیی کوردان منەمەوێت شتێک بەبیری هەمووان بێنمەوە لەم هۆڵەیە ئەو کاتێک کە کوردانی ئێزیدی تووشی جەنۆساید بوون ئەوە شەروانانی ڕۆژاوا بوون کە زۆر قارەمانانە توانیان بە هانای خەڵکەکەمان لە چیای شنگالەوە بچن و کۆریدۆرێک بە شەڕ بکەنەوە بۆ ئەوەی ئەوانە ڕزگار بکرێن و بگەێنرێنە کەناری ئارام و ئەو کاتەشی کۆبانێ کەوتە بەر هێرشێکی وەحشیانەی گروپی تەرۆریستی داعش ئەوە هێزی پێشمەرگەی باشووری کوردستان بوون ڕۆشتن بە هانایی شەڕوانان و پاراستن و نەهێشتنی کەوتنی کۆبانێ پێویستە کات وەکو باسم کرد ئەم نەموزەجە گەشە پێ بدرێ و شێوەیەک لە لێک تێگەیشتنی نەتەوەیی لە نێوان کوردی هەر چوار پارچەکە و دیاسپۆراش بێتەکایەوە و استراتیژێکی نیشتیمانی دابنرێ بۆ خەباتی کوردان لە قۆناغی داهاتوو.
Can I just say one thing with respect to people talking along the lines of unity among Kurds? One concrete step towards that would be to end the brutal embargo on Rojava, which, as far as I know, the KRG continues. So to appeal abstractly to the unity of the Kurdish nation is one thing, but on the ground, since we're here talking about democratic alternatives, we have to ask the question, why has not the KRG been able to behave in a democratic fashion? And it's linked to the way in which they're inserted into the capitalist modernity. So I think it's very important to keep Öcalan's vision of what this democratic alternative is, and when the conversation becomes a conversation about how we can organize to achieve a Kurdish state, I think we're going very much against the spirit of Öcalan's idea that we want a democratic alternative which moves beyond what he would term feudal nationalism to think about democracy. Democracy is an alternative to capitalist modernity. So.
Great. Thanks for allocating time for me addressing a question to the broad panel. In fact, I was motivated by a comment by Mr. Gunter about what would have happened if Mr. Demirtas had chosen to collaborate or work with Erdogan. It was a question which was left open, but made me think if there's any possibilities for Kurds to imagine a future in four parts of Kurdistan, even in Turkey, across the Middle East, a counterpart to work with? First, I mean, it's a twofold question. Can we imagine a situation where Erdogan is pushed toward the lanes of democracy again and turn into a counterpart, a legal counterpart, together with the Kurds, considering the prospects for the region? If not, to what faces should Kurds turn themselves? In other words, whom can we expect Kurds to work with in Middle East in order to constitute peace and democracy in the Middle East?
All right. Well, on the question of whether Demirtas should have worked with Erdogan, I think I have a slight disagreement with Professor Michael Gunter about the timing of this, because the Dolmabahce Accords, as I understood, broke down in February 2015, 4 months before the election of June 15, which you had said was the reason why Erdogan turned against the HDP. I think that Erdogan had turned against the idea of a peace process long before that election, 4 months before. He may have been worried that the HDP was growing in strength and might do well in the elections. That's certainly possible. So there is a potential connection with the elections, but the sequence of events was a bit different from the way it was described. But how can that be reversed? I don't... Sorry, it's also true, I think that Demirtas did make some rather provocative statements after winning 13% and more of the vote in the June 15 elections, so perhaps that is correct, that he should have been a bit more diplomatic, said he would work with Erdogan in some way, but he didn't agree with the authoritarian presidency and was against the idea of a referendum. So there's nuances there of diplomacy and tact which could have been followed better. But the basic understanding, I think, is that Erdogan had decided for other reasons to stop the peace process. He just didn't think it was productive from his point of view. Who can the Kurds work with? It is very difficult. They have to work on their own, I think, and they've shown fantastic initiative and example and energy and imagination in creating this democratic confederalism system in Rojava, which they're also trying to do in southeast Kurdistan when they were able to do before the repression became so massive. I think the Kurds have to rely largely on themselves, and they've done a much better job in doing that than most other small minorities in the world.
Would somebody else? Yeah.
Can I just say one thing with respect to this question of the relationship between the HDP and the authoritarian turn in Turkey? I think it would be a terrible thing for the HDP to be complicit with this authoritarian turn in Turkey, because it's not just a question of Kurds for themselves; it's also a question of politics of left versus right, and the future of the Kurdish project, the Kurdish freedom movement project, is inextricably intertwined with the future of the freedom in Turkey, freedom in the Middle East more generally, and so there has to be in coalition with, as the HDP has very valiantly done, trying to make coalitions with and reinvigorate the broader Turkish and broader Arab lefts.
ئێمە لە باشوور مقولەیەکێ زوو وترێتەوە و لە کۆنتریشا وتراوە کورد ئێمە بێ هاوڕێین بێ کەسی تەنیا چیاکانە، بەڵام من ئەمە نابینم لەم یەک دوو ڕۆژەیە. دەنگ هەیە؟ هەیە، ئۆکەی. خۆشبەختانە من ئەمە نابینم، بەڵام ئەوەی ئێمە دایم بیریەکەین، ئێمە پێویستمان بە هاوڕێ نییە کە خۆمان ناتوانین هاوڕێی خۆمان بین، و ئەمە گەورەترین مشکیلەی ئێمە بۆ لە تاریخەوە و تا ئەمڕۆ. ئێمە نامانوێت خۆمان هاوڕێی خۆمان بین، ناتوانین داوا لە خەڵکی تریش بکەین هاوڕێمان بێت. چەند نمونەیەکێ کلتورێک لە ناو ئێمەیە هەیە، ئێمە قەت محاولەمان نەکردووە لە یەکتر تێبکەین، یەکتر قبول بکەین، و ئەنەما ویستومانە ئەوی کە بسڕینەوە. ئەمە کلتورێکی سەرەتانیە لە ناو سیاسەتی ئێمەیە هەیە، لە مجتەمەعی ئێمەیە. أبي أو بزوترين كات تيفجين كأم كالتورة بقورين يقدون نمونين موا كالسويد وقت خوي بالرحمة بأنالين وزير خارجية سويد كوفاتي كرت كولن باول أو وقت وزير خارجية أمريكا بو صحفية كسؤالي لكرت كوا علاقيته أنالين شون بو جوابك يوبو إيما وكو أرجو عاصمان جواز بين للرأي كمان الاستراتيجي معنا لإيدولوجي معنا والله زور زور لسر أو متفق بين كإيما جوازين وزوريش علاقة منبو نمونيشي ترك إستا حالي حاضر للسويد هي سروشي بارتي شب لقل سروشي بارتي سنتر أنا لب أمدو أنا بيكوا أقارن بهمو سويدا توني أكن وجوازكشان بعين المستوايا أم كالتورة لا يمنية بيويستا كوا يما لو تاركي دكتور يوسف من أمانم تيابيني كوا بيروكي هي أو نيازي هي بلام يما شون وابكين كأما بيبا كالتوريك.
Do you have a question? Can you move to the question, please? To the question, because we're short of time.
سؤالك من بو دكتور يوسف من أمام لا وتاركي بيني ولا سنجاري شي كشازور مسؤولانا وأويتي أخير مو كوا أيوة برامبر نصرت وانما ديالوجي هبه لقاليا بلام اما شون اتوانك كوا ببي بكالتورك بارتكاني كش استجابيان هبه بوشي وجواب بنو شو كم مكوتم مشكلة ما بيحاوري ولاتاني ترنيا بيحاوريتي خو معنا شون اتوانين هو حلكين سباس
طبعا سپاس بۆ جەنابەت هاوڕام لەگەڵ زۆری بۆچوونەکانی جەنابەت و هەموو بۆچوونەکانت لە ڕاستیە ئەوەی کە ئەبێتە هۆی ئەوەی جیاوازیەکان نەبێتە هۆی سڕینەوە بەڵکو ببێتە هۆی بەهێزکردن دروستکردنی دامەزراوەیە بەهێزکردنی دامەزراوەیە پەرلەمان خۆی بۆ خۆی شوێنی گفتوگۆکردنە ئەسڵەن پەرلەمان خۆی بۆ خۆی یانی گفتوگۆکردن لە پەرلەمانە ئەتوانرێ بیر و بۆچوونە جیاوازەکان بە یەکەوە دابنیشن و پێکەوە قسە بکەن و پێکەوە ئاڵوگۆڕی بیرۆڕاکانیان بکەن و ڕێککەون لەسەرەوەی کە چیشەکەن جیا لەمە ڕێککەوتن لەسەرەوەی تەنها لە ڕێگای دموکراسیەوە جیاوازیەکان چارەسەر بکرێ و چەک لە ململانێ سیاسیەکانە بەکار نەهێنرێ و ماڵی گشتی تەنها بۆ بەرژەوەندی گشتی بەکار بهێنرێ نەک بۆ بەرژەوەندی تایبەت و حزبی ئەمەش دیسانەوە ڕێگا خۆشکەرە بن بۆی جیاوازیەکان نەک ببێتە هۆی لاوازیمان بەڵکو ببێتە هۆی دەوڵەمەندیمان و ببێتە هۆی بەرەو پێشبردنمان یعنی من دیسانەوە گەڕێمەوە بۆ ئەوە کە پێشتریش باسم کرد هۆکاری هەرە سەرەکی بەرەو پێشچوونی کۆمەڵگەکانی ڕۆژاوا بریتیە لە بوونی جیاوازی گەورەتیانە بریتیە لە بوونی جیاوازی ئایدۆلۆژی جیاوازی چینایەتی جیاوازی بیرکردنەوە بەڵام ئەم جیاوازیانە هۆکارن بۆ هێنانەکایی پرۆژەی بەدیل و جیاواز هەر کاتێک کێشەیەک ڕویان تێکە هەر کاتێک قەیرانێک ڕویان تێکە کریزێکی سیاسی کریزێکی ئابووری ڕویان تێکە هەر یەکەو لە ڕوانگەی بیر و بۆچوونی جیاوازی خۆیەوە پرۆژە پێشکەشەکەوە هەوڵی بەدەستێنانی دەنگەدات و ئەمە ئەبێتە هۆی بەهێزی و بەرەو پێشوونی بەردەوام ئەمە ڕێگاچاری ئێمەیە نەک هیچ ڕێگاچارەیەکی تر.
This is a question. Yeah, thank you. This is a question for the whole panel. It's a somewhat speculative question about the future of Syria. Assad wants to assert his sovereignty over the whole country. It's quite likely that he might attack DFNS or Rojava. And I understand from informal conversations with PYD members that they would be prepared to take on the challenge to fight fight Assad. And if that was the case, is it likely that the US might re-engage, and because it was always their aspiration to get rid of Assad, but they had such unreliable allies on the ground that they've given up on that and Russia's taken the upper hand. But is it likely that we might be entering another very dangerous stage in the war in Syria? Thanks.
Who'd like to take that? That's the final question, a very, very important question to close on. So, whoever.
Okay, very briefly, Syria has been a Hobbesian war of all against all, so anything is possible. What you said is true. The United States would like to get rid of Assad, but I don't think this is Trump's top aim. And I think an even more likely situation that could get the United States more involved in Syria is Iranian influence. Iranians are very influential in Syria now, and the United States, and Trump has said so repeatedly, the United States is going to oppose Iran. Trump's not talking about doing that against Assad. And also Israel is not going to tolerate an Iranian force on the Israeli border. So anything's possible in Syria, but I think the Iranian situation is maybe the most immediate thing that might call forth U.S. and Russian and Turkish. Turkey is very opposed to Iran too. So all these things are possible, yes.
I'll just say a few words about in answer to your question. I was in Damascus in September, 3 months ago, and I was told by Samir Suleiman, who was the deputy head of the Syrian Army's political administration, he said, "We don't recognize the Kurdish forces." So they're very dismissive, and we have no coordination with them. But they are there, and the US supports them. So the implication of what he was saying is that we will not challenge them because the US is behind them. And also Buthaina Shaban, who was another person I managed to interview in Damascus in September, said this small force, very demeaning about the YPG and YPJ, this small force does not express the opinion of all the Kurds in Syria. Millions of Kurds in Syria are very good citizens who want the unity of Syria and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. So very patronizing comments. So it shows that the rhetoric is very anti-YPG, but the reality of the Syrian government at the moment is that they are not going to confront the YPG, I think, and I don't think Russia would allow them to do it. Russia doesn't call all the shots. There are many instances where Assad has not done what Russia wants him to do, and we still don't know about whether he will accept the kind of political solution that the Russians are advocating. But I think on such a big military issue as to turn their forces against the YPG on the battlefield, I think Russia would be able to exert a powerful veto.
Jonathan, you have a lot to say here. What would you say?
Well, what I'm going to say is it's lunchtime, but just in one sentence, I think that it's certainly the key issue that Rahila has brought up, in my opinion at least, who spent a lot of time in the Rojava, the issue, what will happen now at this crossroads time when the war against ISIS is winding down, when the US is either going to go home or not go home, and then the issue, if the US leaves, will certainly be, is Assad then going to move against a depleted Kurdish force without, in that instance, air cover? Without air power, it's very hard for even a very brave force to fight against an oncoming attacker with air power. It's the crucial point. On this note, we're going to close. It's been a fascinating discussion. Lunch now, reconvening at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.
So we're going for lunch way outside. D'accord. On ne sait jamais, parce qu'on a eu monsieur, moi je laisse tout ici.
Ça va. On touche rien.
Ça va.
Ça va. Juste les déchets qu'on va y aller.
Oui, parce qu'il a dit.